same. If this boy gets you back again. This boy. This boy.
Two. Clerk, would you conduct roll call, please?
Supervisor Brown.
Here.
Supervisor McCowan.
Here.
Supervisor Pinches.
Here.
Supervisor Jurdy.
Here.
Chair Hamburg is absent by prearrangement. Vice Chair Pinches is presiding.
Okay. Eric Larson, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Okay, we'll move into public expression. This is for items that are not on the agenda. We'll limit this to 10 minutes per subject. So we'll start out with John Sakowitz.
Good morning, Vice Chair Pinches, Supervisors, County Council, County CEO. John Sakowitz, Ukiah, speaking as a public citizen only. I want to be one of the first members of the public to congratulate the county on its improved bond rating. As you know, Fitch has upgraded Mendocino County debt. Pension obligation bonds were reaffirmed at BBB+, and the general obligation bonds were affirmed at A-. This, of course, is a result of a lot of fiscal discipline that this board has exercised in the last few years under the leadership of Supervisor McCowan last year and under Supervisor Hamburg this year, who chairs the board. The Fitch bond rating report affirms continued financial improvement in the county, attributes the bond upgrade to the fact that management has raised fund balance targets, established policies to help meet the goals, updated treasury practices, and has begun preparations for its first capital improvement plan in 7 years. A sustained record of surplus operations and enhanced financial flexibility says Fitch will likely result in an upgrade in the near term. So congratulations will be in order sometime in the near term as well. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of these improvements have come on the backs of labor, all the collective bargaining units. The county's labor force has shrunk by over 200 workers in the last couple of years, and the remaining workers have taken a 10% pay cut, some of whom are in the audience right now. That said, I hope the county continues to exercise financial discipline. We have, of course, a spike in healthcare costs of 45% last year. We have increased pension obligation costs. We're going to have a new Gatsby regulations coming down the pike. We still have to settle with the IRS for past abuses of excess earnings and diversions. So congratulations to the county. A job well done, and I hope you continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, is it Stillis? Tammy Stiles?
You guys will get my name right one day.
You can pull that microphone down, Tammy.
Thank you. Good morning. On behalf of the nearly 1,000 members of SEIU ULTCW who provide care to low-income seniors and people with disabilities in Mendocino County, I'm writing in response to the February 12, 2013 memorandum to the Board of Supervisors from the county's ACEO, Kyle Knopp, regarding California's community first choice option. Although Mendocino County and in-home supportive services, IHSS providers, have been working without a contract since November 1st, 2011, and have yet to receive dates from county officials to begin collective bargaining, we felt compelled to respond to the memorandum as it appears to be setting a questionable tone, for negotiations based on the inaccurate comparisons and making potential decisions on the use of federal funding without full consideration of how best to serve our county's seniors and people with disabilities.
Thank you, Tammy. Melissa Crawford?
Hi, good morning. Nice to see you all again. In this memorandum, Mr. Knopp attempts to provide justification to the Board of Supervisors' decision to not consider an increase to workers' wages by comparing the hourly rates of Mendocino County home care providers with those in other counties. This comparison not only makes us question the county's intent to bargain in good faith, but also is insignificant as it is not based on the cost of living in each county, but rather the poverty wages being paid to the workers. When looking at what a living wage would be for each of the selected counties, Mendocino County is second only to Sonoma County, which currently pays its IHSS providers $11.50 an hour. Mr. Knopp also mentioned that fiscal duress of the county and attributes that increased cost of county employee retirement and health care as a reason for county employees' wages cut and the county's inability to fund infrastructure improvements. Yet, as he points to these items as being a hindrance to the county, he is remiss in that for Mendocino County home care providers, retirement and comprehensive health care are non-existent. It's also important to note that according to county records, a custodian trainee who is the lowest paid county employee still earns more the first day of the job than an in-home health care provider of over 20 years.
Thank you, Melissa. Dana Saxton?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As members of SEIU ULTCW, Mendocino County home care providers are proud of the role we play in securing CFCO funding for the state and its counties. We recognize that if used properly, this new funding stream would help ensure that our most vulnerable residents would continue to receive the vital home care services they rely on to live safely at home. However, based on Mr. Knopp's memorandum, we are concerned that all options on how to best to utilize CFCO funding to those in need are not being considered. Prior to any decisions being made about the use of CFCO, we request a meeting with the county to open contract negotiations, as the allocation of CFCO funding could impact the lives of both caregivers and care recipients. We are anxious to begin negotiations and look forward to hearing promptly from the county's representative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any more members of the public who want to speak on? That's it? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, well.
Sheriff Fallman.
Oh, Sheriff?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Board. I apologize.
We'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll only use 2, one on my account. I apologize. I have to be gone when you discuss item 6, B as in boy. We had an incident last night that required my attention this morning. I fully support this, and I hope that, and I thank the 2 supervisors who are putting this on, Supervisor Jurdy and Supervisor McCowan. Thank you very much. The Sheriff's Office fully supports it. I'm sorry, I probably will not be here when you discuss this. Unless somebody can call me or text me and let me know, then I'll try to rush over here. I fully support it, and I will commit to work with this board on, if you want statistics at the end of the year, if we utilize it and so forth. So
it'll be definitely this morning.
Okay, then I will be here, but I'll be on another detail if somebody could contact me, and I'll try to rush over. And on a much more positive note, that is positive also, but the bill that was not approved by the Senate last year regarding the reimbursement for the large manhunt in Fort Bragg in 2011, that bill has been resurrected since the Christopher Dorner situation in Los Angeles. Law enforcement is looking for reimbursement in that. And so I talked to the San Bernardino sheriff yesterday, and he and I are going to be working together to hopefully get a new bill on the books that's going to allow law enforcement to get the same type of restitution that fire agencies get during huge emergencies. So I'm still going to push for Mendocino getting some type of reimbursement for what happened. So thank you for letting me be out of order.
Any other members? Oh.
Yeah. Sheriff, there's a time I need to meet with you because CSAC is also proposing some policy on illegal marijuana cultivation, trespass grows, and so I want to meet with you and talk to you about it.
I'd love to. I had a chance to meet with the Farm Bureau and discuss it, and I think there are some things that we need to go to and some things we need to stay away, so I'd be happy to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public want to speak under public expression? Okay, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. We are going to continue the minutes of January 8th, 2013 at the request of our clerk. So, clerk, do we establish public proper notice?
Yes, proper notice has been established.
Okay, are there any items that any board members want to pull for separate consideration? Supervisor McCowan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item 4P, as in Paul.
Okay. Any other? Supervisor Brown?
Thank you, Vice Chair Pinches. I just want to make sure there were some minor corrections to the minutes. Those did get completed.
Yes, the administrative corrections have been made regarding the spelling. And
Okay, just spelling and et cetera.
So if there's item 4P will be pulled, can we have a motion? Yeah, we.
Oh. What's that? I thought it was 4P was the resolution. That's what mine says. Yeah. Well, that's not what I'm looking at.
Well, let's go back.
Which one do you want to pull?
4P.
4P?
And just to clarify, adoption of resolution approving the request to sell tax defaulted property subject to the power of sale.
I would just say that my version of the agenda says that's Q, but okay.
Well, I'm looking at...
Okay.
Mine is P as well.
Well, that's the one we're pulling anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have members of the public want to speak on this? On the consent calendar, we'll have a chance on item B or Q, whatever it is in a minute. Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the remainder of the consent calendar?
So move. Second.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Brown, seconded by Supervisor McCowan. All those in favor?
Comment?
Sure. On the regular consent calendar?
Yeah, and normally we would allow the public to comment too.
Well, I've
if they
already
wish.
asked them for comment on that.
Okay, well, on 4I, I think it's a very minor point. The third paragraph, we say providing sustainable harvested materials for mills. I would suggest providing sustainably harvested.
That's a fine correction.
Okay, so if that can be made without objection.
Correction so noted.
Yeah.
Okay, are there members of the public who want to speak on any items on the consent calendar? Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carried with Supervisor Hamburg absent. Okay, item 4P or Q or which, depends on whose agenda it is. This is on the resolution, right?
Correct. And I pulled this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I am concerned with the number of Brook Trails properties that are included in here again. I think we're all pretty aware of the situation that in contrast to other areas of the county when vacant lots in Brook Trails tax default and are offered for sale at auction, they don't sell. I won't go into detail as to the reasons for that, but this then on one level becomes a general fund subsidy to the Brook Trails Community Services District, and on another level, if the properties do sell, the county is somewhat complicit in fraud in that people think they're buying a building lot, but under present conditions they can't build. There's no immediately foreseeable prospect that they will be able to build. So without further effort on behalf of the county to make sure we're accurately describing the condition of these parcels, I'm not able to support this. And I also think that the agenda summary is inaccurate where it says offering property for sale achieves, and the purpose of the auction sales is to collect the unpaid taxes and to return the property to a revenue generating status by conveying the property to another owner. And then it says offering property for sale achieves this by either selling the property or forcing redemption. In fact, as has become increasingly the case with regard to the Brook Trails lots, we don't sell them at auction. They don't sell. So, I'm prepared to be outvoted on this, but I can't support it as presented.
So what would be your direction?
The direction would be to return the item to the treasurer tax collector and have her provide documentation regarding what we're doing to alert people to the true condition of these properties. And another point I'd like to make based on a response I received from the treasurer tax collector this morning, 67 Brook Trails lots, or I think most of them were Brook Trails that didn't sell last year, aren't even being offered for sale again this year. So I think we're kind of just looking at the tip of the iceberg. And I have requested that this issue of the Brook Trails lots as they impact Teeter be agendized next month for further consideration by the board, because again, we are in effect providing a general fund subsidy to another agency.
Tom, County Council, what is the legality of the county getting involved in basically advertising for or against the value of a piece of property? I mean, if I was the owner of a piece of property in Brook Trails in place and the county come out and said, hey, don't you buy his piece of property, it's a bad deal. I mean, I would think that I would have a legitimate claim against the county I don't think, is that a function of county government to get involved in basically the advertising for or the advertising against any assessor's parcel in this county?
Thomas Parker, County Council, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. When tax sales occur, the properties that are sold, whatever their issues are, whether there's hazardous material on the land or it's landlocked or whatever its particular negative issues are, the land is sold as is. The land is also sold to tax sale without any representations by the county as to the nature of the land or what its bad points are or what its good points are. Put simply, the tax collector is not a real estate agent who is under a fiduciary responsibility to say, this is a really bad piece of land or a really great piece of land, and you could sue me if you discover I'm wrong. We sell property as is, warts and all, if they exist. And tax sales are the proverbial caveat emptor type of sale, which is you get what you pay for. And if you choose to bid on a tax sale piece of property as a potential purchaser or bidder, you are under an obligation to do your own due diligence and find out what the nature of the land is, what issues are there, and whether or not it's something you want to bid on. The onus is on you, the bidder. It's not on the tax collector. A lot of tax collectors, as a matter of policy, in some areas will say, if the land has hazardous material on it, for instance, they will mention that so that people know it's a hazardous material site. But you don't have to as a matter of law. Does that answer your question, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just guess what I'm trying to get out of you is, the way I read your statement is there is maybe a little bit of liability involved if the county comes out and says this is a bad piece of property, and I think that the owner might have some kind of a recourse, but
yeah, there wouldn't be a slander of title, but the tax collector's job is not to warrant the condition of a piece of land or its desirability. It's to say taxes are owed, state law requires it be sold, here is the price.
Supervisor Jerry?
Well, I think when it comes to the Brook Trails parcels, I mean, these are parcels that people have basically walked away from them because they can't build on them, not because there's toxics on them, but because there's a lack of water and they're unbuildable parcels. And so I think what Supervisor McCown's bringing up makes sense, is that, the county doesn't need to be perpetuating this myth that these parcels in particular are somehow buildable, viable parcels when they're not. And, my understanding is that with the lack of water and the lack of financing from the Brook Trails Association, that they're not in a position to go and build a big reservoir, and that's not going to happen. And so therefore they're not going to be creating the water necessary for these parcels to be built, and that some of these parcels need to be consolidated, 2 and 3 parcels added together into one.
I think one of the reasons is not necessarily the tax bill that people have a problem paying, it's the high assessment for sewer and water that they're being charged. So that makes it, to hold on to them parcels for long-term investment is kind of something they want to shy away from. Normally, if a person buys a property real cheap, they figure, well, I'll hang on to it for 20, maybe even 30 years and sell it when my grandkids need to go to college or something. But that's a real deterrent with your high assessment fees that are attached. So, Sherry, do you have any comment on this? You don't have to, but.
Sherry Shatmeyer, Treasurer Tax Collector, and Chair Pinches and members of the board. One thing that I wanted to stress is that we are doing very adequate disclosures on every parcel that we find out. If there's anything going on, we make sure that we disclose it not only on our website but in the newspaper when we publish it. With these Brook Trails lots, what ends up happening is, and it's probably part of the reason that these Brook Trails lots are not selling, is that when you go to the website for our online auction, it throws you right, we have a section there that will throw you right to the Brook Trails site. So that Brook Trails site will tell you all about the water moratoriums and all the information that you could possibly need. And in fact, that's been lifted. I think the last time I looked, there was like 24 sites that were available, or 24 water hookups. But basically, that's the reason that these are not selling, is because we are disclosing what they're all about. What we're doing in our office is we're complying with the bottom part of this agenda summary that says, per Revenue and Taxation Code 3692A, the tax collector shall, it doesn't say may, it says shall, attempt to sell tax defaulted property within 4 years of the time that the property becomes subject to sale for non-payment of taxes. So we're doing this just because it's mandated. And we can see, because we've got 67 held out from the last several years, that we're going to add, more than likely, these however many 44 Brook Trails parcels will probably get combined with those. But we are doing what we are legally responsible to do.
Good point.
Thank you, and I appreciate that clarification that we are attempting to put people on notice, in effect, by directing them to the Brook Trails site. There is one landowner who I won't name, who I think owns approximately 300 lots, and unless something is changed, he's probably now in year 4 of not paying the taxes, and then next year we would expect to see those 300 more or less lots added to the tax defaulted properties?
I think it was about 150 lots, and we have had contact from that individual, and he is starting to somewhat try to market some of his properties, and he's got the best lots. He knew what he was doing. The lots that he bought were, I mean, as far as in developing that whole Brook Trail subdivision, is he bought the best lots, the higher quality lots. So he is starting to market those. He basically has stepped away due to other reasons. He's getting quite elderly, as well as I think he's had some health issues, and he is coming back into the picture, so that may help.
Although starting to market is a lot different from
than
being
actually
able,
marketing. Correct.
It's a lot different from being able to say that he sold even a single lot.
Correct.
Because I think his plan, as stated approximately a year ago, he would, quote, sell a few lots and then he would pay the taxes. I'm not sure that's the order in which things are going to happen here.
Right. Right. The one thing that I would like to stress to this board is that I think that, in essence, yes, there was some bleeding, especially with Teeter, but I feel like with what the assessor's office has done with, they've evaluated the whole subdivision in Brook Trails. They have looked at all the lots. They've classified them as like low, medium, high grade lots, put an assigned value to them, which is pretty uniform, I think, throughout the whole subdivision. That's helped because, you know, it's brought those everything down, and the fact what this board did where you have basically de-teetered the Brook Trails lots. I think those two combined, I think, will hopefully help this, and it may take a while, but I think eventually it has stopped the bleeding here.
Well, we only de-teetered the special assessments.
Which is,
we did not de-teeter the ad valorem, so that continues to run every year, and then gets added to the value we need to try and recover, except when they don't sell, then you can start discounting them. But that's just another way of saying, yeah, the county is not recovering the taxes and the costs associated with these properties.
The value, because they've been lowered, most of the ones that are not being paid are the ones maybe valued at like $3,000. So you're talking about a $30 a year assessment. It's the directs that were really where we had the issues. Were mostly the directs, and they wanted to raise those directs at Brook Trails. So
and I won't drag this out further, but when we do have an update next month, then I'm sure you'll provide the board with the full updating of the different dollar amounts associated, you know, because it helps that we've de-teetered the direct assessments. I think the ad valorem still adds up to a sizable amount, especially if these lots continue to tax default. Thank you.
Well, one important point I'd like to make. I believe there are water hookups available right now in Brook Trails. So it's not really in a water moratorium. I want the public to know.
Well,
yeah, I believe there's 24 water hookups the last time I looked.
Yeah. So
But very expensive. Very
There's
expensive.
24 water hookups, and the district board has priced them at a level that the water hookup costs several times the value of most of the lots up there.
Correct.
Thank you, Sherry.
All good.
Okay, if there's no more discussion here, can we entertain a motion?
Okay. You're looking my
Well,
way.
we have
I
a
can see it
recommended-
now.
We have a recommended motion in, you know,
Well, I'll take a shot at it.
okay, because the taxation code says that we shall attempt to sell his properties.
And I agree, Vice Chair Pinches. So the recommended motion is to adopt the resolution approving the request to sell tax defaulted property, subject to the power of sale, and authorize the chair to sign the same. So I make that motion.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that, but I do hope that at some point in the future we could maybe have a discussion about Brook Trails, and you know, if they have 500 parcels that are never going to be built upon because they'll never have the water, and if there's some way of consolidating those parcels, I think the board ought to, you know, show some leadership in this, because it was the county that created these parcels in the first place.
When I was on the board in the 90s, what we did is we had a incentive program through the building and planning where we reduced the rate for the merger process, and that was very successful. Maybe it's something we could look at again. But I really think some of these issues should come forward. You know, Brook Trails has their own elected board of directors, and some of these initiatives need to come forward from them of what they want to do to help themselves out of their own problem.
Well, I think the board needs to partake in this discussion because they're sort of looking at their organization and the viability of their organization, and it was the county that created all these parcels, some of which will never be built upon.
Is there any members of the public want to speak further on this? Supervisor McCall?
Well, I agree with Supervisor Jordy. It's the county that needs to take action because it's the county that is providing this subsidy that no other district gets. So, I'll actually support the motion on the floor with the understanding this will be coming back to the board for a more comprehensive discussion.
And I do agree with that.
And Sherry, you will be bringing this back for further discussion? Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried with Supervisor Hamburg absent.
Thank you, Sherry.
So I guess you got your work cut out for you, Sherry. Okay. Agenda item 5D, this is a presentation of retirement system actuarial valuation for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2012, and adoption of retirement system rates for fiscal year 2013 and 14. We have with us this morning Andy Young and Rich White. Rich is our retirement administrator. You're the sponsor of this item. So, is it Rich or Andy? Which one do you want to introduce this?
Well, good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board. As you said, Richard White, the Administrator of the Retirement System, with Andy Young, the Vice President and Associate Actuary of the Siegel Company. This morning you have in front of you an agenda item to accept the actuarial valuation report and adopt the recommended contribution rates for fiscal year period July 1, 2013 to June 30, 2014. The rates in front of you this morning are in two parts due to the recently enacted pension formulas, the new pension formulas by the Board of Supervisors. Members hired on or before December 31, 2012 are contained, the contribution rates are contained in the actuarial valuation and review report as of June 30, 2012. And for members hired on or after January 1, 2013, those contribution rates are in a letter to the MCERA Board of Retirement, which you have in front of you. That letter is dated December 28, 2012. The contribution rates in both reports have been adopted by the MCERA Board of Retirement as provided for in the government code. And I will now turn this over to Andy to go through the rates and the valuation report with you.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Andy Young with your actuary with the Siegel Company. With Rich's introduction, I'd like to turn your attention to the main valuation report. So this is the report where we provide the recommended contribution rate for the upcoming 13-14 fiscal year for what we would generally refer to as members in the current tiers. So what is unique about the other secondary report on the CalPEPR is that right now, as we speak, we are only enrolling members into that plan. As you know, that plan became effective 1/1/2013. So it will not be until the 2013 valuation, the valuation that we'll be conducting a couple of months down the road, where we would actually have actual members enroll in those plans. So with that, I'd like to call your attention to section 1 of the report. So what I would like to do is to go through just a couple of pages, provide you with a little bit of a highlight of the results from this year's valuation. And by all means, if you have any questions while I'm doing the presentation, or if you would like additional detail, we would certainly be happy to go through the other pages in the report with you. So if you look at section 1, I'd like you to look at the page I. So this would be Roman numeral 1. At the bottom of this page, section 1, Roman numeral 1, page I, we have provided to you at the last paragraph of the report what is referred to as the board's actuarial funding policy. So in the valuation, and as it is referenced throughout this report, there's a normal cost contribution to be paid every year that an employee works continuously for the county. So this is generally referred again as to the normal cost contribution. That contribution right now is shared between the employer and the employee. Now, because the plan has an unfunded actuarial accrued liability, also referred to as the UAAL in the valuation, there's now a mortgage that needs to be paid to pay off or amortize that unfunded liability. So according to the retirement board's funding policy, anytime we have an unfunded actuarial accrued liability, that liability is paid off or amortized over a period of 27 years. It used to be 30, is now down to 27. So tee up for the retirement board for the review sometime later this year would be a review of the actuarial funding policy at both the retirement board also at the board of supervisors level. You have already asked the question, what are systems outside of Mendocino doing in order to amortize or pay off the unfunded liability? What is the advantage or disadvantage of using a shorter or longer period? So those are the types of questions that have been raised again at the board of supervisor level last year, as well as the board of retirement. So something that we have teed up to discuss with the board of retirement later this year. But for the time being, for this particular valuation, any unfunded liability has been amortized over a period of 27 years.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, if you turn over to the second page, double I. So this section of the report provides the highlight of the valuation. So I'm going to skip over item 1 and go to the second bullet point. One question that we talk about at both the retirement board as well as the supervisor level is what is the funded ratio of the retirement plan? So as you may recall, the funded ratio simply measures how much assets we have how much do we have in assets to defray each dollar worth of liability. So for this current valuation, that funded ratio is 73.6%. I'm sorry, it was 74.1%, and it's slightly increased from the 73.6 from last year. But if you look at the absolute dollar amount of the unfunded liability amount actually has grown somewhat from the $124.9 million last year to about $126.5 million this year. Now, if you look on the left-hand margin of the report, you will see the page reference.
So Andy, can I back up just a minute? It says
absolutely.
That the funded ratio decreased from 75.1% to 70.1%. That's 5%. That's pretty significant, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, this is actually something new that we have added to this year's valuation report. So in addition to measuring the unfunded liability using this so-called smooth actuarial value of assets, we have also decided to measure the funded ratio using the market value of assets. So in a nutshell, what's the difference between the two, the smooth value and the market value, is that if we have to determine the employer's contribution rate requirement using the market value of assets, it can be very volatile because on one day the market value can go up and on the other day it can come down. So rather than to use this very volatile market value, we have used a smooth actuarial value of assets. Now, as we will see in a page later on this report, anytime we earn more than the assumed rate of 7.75, and for that matter, anytime we earn less than the assumed rate of 7.75, we take that loss or gain and smooth it out over a period of 5 years. Now, one thing that we will highlight later on in this report is, as a result of the smoothing methodology, we are now sitting on losses that have not yet been recognized as part of the contribution rate determination process. So that amount of loss was about 6%. So that's the reason why, depending on whether or not you look at the smooth value or the market value, the funded ratio could go down to as low as 70.1%. And then, like I said, later on, there's a page devoted just to, a bullet point devoted just to answering the question. If we were to so use the market value of assets, the funded ratio would now be, instead of the 74%, it would only be 70% or so. So what is the impact of that on the contribution rate requirement? So we would have a bullet point to answer that question in a second as well.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, on the left-hand side, like I said, is the margin is where we would have provided the place where you can see in the valuation report, which goes through more detail as to how the unfunded liability has changed from the last valuation to this year's valuation. So maybe with that in mind, if I may ask you to turn to page 38 of the report for me.
38.
38, correct. So we are now in section 3. Exhibit I, and page 38. So this is where we have taken the amount of unfunded liability from the plan from last year, the $124.9 million that you can see on item 1 of this page, and go through and develop how the change in unfunded liability has taken place, all the way down to the $126 million that I was mentioning early on as of the day of this valuation in 2012. Now, from item 1 through 5, this basically goes through and asks the hypothetical question, which is, if all the actuarial assumptions of the plan have been met, how would the unfunded liability have changed from the $124.9 billion to the unfunded liability this year? Now, one thing that you would notice is that the unfunded liability amount actually would have been expected to go up even more, because instead of the $124.9 million, if all the assumptions have been met, the unfunded liability this year would have been at $131.8 million. Now, at that point, you may ask, so how come, even though the county is continuing to pay its contributions, the members are continuing to pay the normal cost contributions, so how come the unfunded liability of the plan would go up even if all the assumptions were to be met? And the reason behind that, as you may recall from our presentation last year, has to do with how the amortization of the unfunded liability is structured. Right now, the unfunded liability is scheduled to be paid off over a period of 27 years, and the amortization payment itself is calculated to remain as a level percent of payroll, assuming that the payroll for the county will actually grow at the rate of 4% every year. So now here comes two places where in actuality, the 4% assumption has not been met. Number one, as you have heard from the public during the early part of the presentation, there was actually a reduction in the headcount, as you're aware of, in the county. As a matter of fact, in another page in the report, the payroll for the county has actually come down by over 10% from 2011 to 2012. So that means that whereas we expect the payments to remain a level percent of payroll, assuming payroll will grow at 4%, but in this case, there's actually a reduction in the payroll. There's a reduction in the headcount, reduction in the payroll. So as a matter of fact, the payment is not being made to the unfunded liability at the assumed rate. Now,
Supervisor Jury?
So I have a question on that. In one part of the report, you said that the drop in value of the fund was primarily caused, the single largest cause was this drop in the number of employees, and therefore the payment from the county was based on each employee. And then another part of the report, you say that you're basing this coming year's payments on 1,069 employees. And I guess the question I have is, I don't know if this question's for you or for this county staff, but is the county expecting to have 1,069 filled positions throughout the course of the year, or does the county budget 1,069 authorized positions? Because we know there's a history of some vacancies within the system.
Now, again, attempt to answer the question, at least from the standpoint of the actuarial valuation process, because in the valuation, it is our assumption that the number of active employees will stay about the same from one year to the next. So which means that in the fiscal year 2013 and 14, which we are recommending the contribution rate for from this report, we're expecting to see about the same number of headcounts, about, call it 1,070 employees in the upcoming fiscal year.
Oh. Andy, I got a question. Back on line 4, it says interest. That's where the $10 million that's the reason that could you explain how that's calculated and what that's? I mean, I understand you start with an unfunded liability at the first of the year, and then you have the cost, and then the contributions, and then what's this $10 million which raises up your UAL?
Yeah, that's right.
What is that?
Yeah, so because in the valuation, not all the benefit payments are currently expected to be made, especially, for example, we have active employees who have yet to retire from the county. So in the valuation, what we have to do is to account for the fact that $1 worth of payment to be made 1 year from now is worth a little bit less than the $1 worth of payment that we need to make to our current retirees today. So this is also otherwise known as the time value of money. So the reality is, in the valuation, all the liabilities that are falling due 1 year from now has been discounted with 1 year of interest. All the liabilities that are falling due 2 years from now have been discounted with 2 years of interest and so on and so forth. So implicit in that particular assumption is the fact that we expect the fund to earn the assumed rate of 7.75.
But that's about a 9% rate. Isn't that fairly high?
That actually should work out, Supervisor, to 7.75% of these $124 million. So there's an interest on both the unfunded liability as well as on the normal cost, because the normal costs also have to be adjusted with interest.
But that's certainly the number that keeps making your actuarial unfunded liability rise every year, though. I mean, is that you're pretty set on that being an assumption?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So to the extent that I know that when this question came up early on when we were preparing the Cal Pepper report, the Board of Retirement has a policy to look at the discount rate or the investment return assumption every 3 years. The assumption was last reviewed as part of the 2011 valuation. So I think before the next review is up, which would be in about 2 years' time or 1 year time, I think we continue to believe that would be the proper assumption to use to discount the liability, namely that the 7.75% would continue to be a sound assumption to use for the valuation.
Go ahead. Carmen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to comment based on Supervisor Jurdy's question. We've gone the last couple years between 1,058 and 1,029. So if you're using a figure of 1,069, I don't think that's an unusual figure for where we are today. It was back between 2007 and 2009 that we dropped from 1,377 employees paying into the system to 1,000 plus. So, but with that, though, you've talked about the pay cut, and the 10% pay cut when staff initially took it was a $5 million pay cut across the board for the county. So that $5 million, I'm not sure how that translates in here, but it seems that you're making the point that with lower staff and lower costs for labor, that's been significant here. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I know that you also in your report that you plan for staff salaries going up. And when we made all of our wage concessions, when we asked for those wage concessions, we did not ask for employees to give up any merit increases. So if an employee has been here every year for 5 years, they do get a merit increase. So they do get a 5% raise. And so I'm assuming that you have utilized that in your study.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And I think Rich was quick to remind me that when we provide the headcount in this valuation report, of course, we have included a headcount for all the participating employers, of course, the county being the biggest employer. We also have to include the court as well as a few other special districts in the valuation.
I'm waiting for the good news. That's all.
Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well,
that's why we put you on a retirement board.
Well, I already.
So let's start the good news right now.
Well, I don't mean to disappoint you, but I just wanted to highlight that the gain from lower than expected salary increases, $13.8 million. That in effect represents that the unfunded liability is $13.8 million less just for this 1 year than it otherwise would have been. And I believe the previous 2 years we've seen similar offsets. So the steps that the county has been taking to achieve a balanced budget by reducing our personnel costs has not only helped the county to achieve a balanced budget, but it's also resulted in a significant reduction in what the unfunded liability otherwise would have been. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that's right, because Supervisor McGowan was referring to the rest of the changes, because early on I said that the unfunded liability would have gone up to $131 million even if all the assumptions were to be met. So now let's look at those assumptions and see how they have either been met or not been met. The one item which is huge would be item 6A. So in the valuation, because we are trying to do a projection of all the liabilities in the long run. So typically our approach has been that even though the employer is asking us to take into consideration that in the short term you're not granting any salary increases, and in this case active members have been asked to share in the pain of the county, and there were salary reductions. But nonetheless, in the valuation, because this is a long-term projection, we have continued to assume that salary will go up. So to the extent that the salary did not go up, which is what happened for at least 2 years, we have been the actuary for the Retirement Association. This year, all by itself, has created a reduction in the liability in the neighborhood of $13.8 million. So then you can see that had it not been for that reduction in the liabilities, the other changes of the experience during 2011, 2012, including, for example, that we have yet to suffer another year of returns on a market basis, even after going through the smoothing process of less than the assumed rate of 7.75. So that's the $3.6 million. And there were other investment losses plus an assumption change that we have recommended to the Board of Retirement to now pre-anticipate the conversion of sick leaves. So long and short is, had it not been for the fact that the salary increases or the salary decreases which took place for the active members, there would be a further increase in the unfunded liability of the plan. But having said that, because of that huge reduction in the unfunded liability of $13.8 million, you can see that that is more than enough to offset not just the experience for 11 or 12, but rather it actually brought down the unfunded liability that would otherwise have been reported at close to $132 million all the way to $127 million.
And I'd like to point out for the board what Andy mentioned to you to show that the retirement board continues to work very aggressively on getting the funding of the pension system to a very stable and a predictable place. And one of the things that the Board of Retirement did, which is listed on this page under 6D, is introduce an actuarial assumption to anticipate the conversion of unused sick leave. As the board is aware, your employees are allowed to convert unused sick leave to service credit time. That has been something that's been going on for quite a while. But it was never a part of the actuarial assumption. So it was never paid for by the employer, by the county, or by the employees ahead of time. So whenever an employee would convert the unused sick leave credit to service credit, it was a cost that went right into your unfunded liability. So in an attempt to get in front of this, the Board of Retirement made that change recently. And it did add, it has been added to this valuation, and in the future will be added to, continue to be added to your normal costs going forward. So you will pay for this benefit, this conversion of unused sick leave. You will pay for that on a normal cost basis. So both the employer and the employee will pay for this benefit going forward, and you will not see it to the extent that it's converted and the assumptions are accurate. You will not see it again in unfunded liability going forward.
And this is just the first year this has changed?
That's correct. This is the first year, and this is the cost of that for the first year going in there. This is the first year it's been done that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so then, does this $2.9 million reflect an element of catching up for not having done this in previous years, or you're saying it's reflected in the unfunded liability? So can we anticipate that each year going forward, the approximate cost of this will be in the $3 million range?
This is actually, like Rich has indicated, a one-time only adjustment. So in other words, the $2.9 million really represent on the books, folks have active employees already have accumulate certain amount of sick leave that have never been funded for by the employer. So this is really to try to catch up to all the amounts that have been on the books have not been reported as a liability in the prior valuations.
And then the amount going forward will be a fraction of this each year.
That's right. Not only that, but it would be, like Rich has indicated, paid for as part of the normal cost. So if all the assumptions were to be met, which we expect it to be the case, then there would not be an incremental unfunded liability that would creep up in in the future valuations.
So
thank you.
The way it's looking, because that other 4.8 million was a one year delay. So when you come back to us next year, it should actually show where our unfunded liability is actually starting to turn down, right? Of course, that's making a general assumption. But
yeah, I think
that's pretty safe to say, would you say?
I actually would be of the opposite opinion. Probably the liability, even if all the assumptions were to be met, next year when we look at item 5, for example, it would be higher, even higher than the 131 that we are reporting this year, for example, higher than the 126 we are reporting this year. And the reason being that the unfunded liability, again, has been amortized over a period of 27 years. Even if the payroll growth assumption has been met, what we have been referring to in the prior presentation is that because the unfunded liability amortization is so long and it's amortized as a level percentage of payroll, we have this so-called negative amortization. So what this is that unlike the mortgage we pay on our houses, when we go to the bank and when we say, well, what's the longest mortgage I can afford or you can offer to me at the bank, the bank would say 30-year mortgage. So when we look at the payments that are made to the bank every year and the principal that are being paid down as a result of that 30-year mortgage, you would notice that, well, in the first couple of years of initiating the loan, very little amounts have been used to pay off the principal. Pretty much all of the amounts have been used to pay the interest. So that's the case for a conventional 30-year loan. But that's not the case for the way that the payments to the unfunded liability have been calculated. Because right now there's an assumption that the payments amount will increase at the rate of 4% every year. So the long and short is, if you look at the payment amortization schedule, which I think we have provided to the board in a separate letter, which I assume we can make copies for the retirement for the board of supervisors if you're interested. But if you look at that schedule, you would notice that the payment amount actually is not even sufficient to pay down the interest at the rate of 7.75% that we charge on the unfunded liability. So it would not be until several more years down the road when the amortization period is down to about 18 years, when the payments that is being made to the UAAL would be more than sufficient to pay the interest.
So I guess that leads to the next question. How high is our unfunded liability going to rise before it peaks out?
Yeah, we do have a schedule. I don't know if, Rich, we want to... Okay. Yeah.
Well, but then that's also subject to change based on what the actual market experience is, and that's the big joker in the deck. As long as we do not meet the assumed rate of return, the unfunded liability is going to keep going up. And then even if the market outperforms the assumed rate of return, the smoothing factor would limit the recognition of gains in any particular year. And I think part of what you're telling us is that based on the experience of the last few years, we still have unrecognized losses that we're going to be looking at for the next couple of years. So even if the market does well and we meet the assumed rate of return, we're probably still going to see an increase in the unfunded liability for the next 2 years. Is that accurate?
That's right. So that's why when I said if I have to take out my crystal ball and to estimate how the unfunded liability would change from this year to next year when we present the 2013 valuation, I would certainly agree with Supervisor McGowan that the two reasons why I would actually have assumed, I would have actually predict that the unfunded liability would go up. Number one is because we have a relatively long amortization period. And also secondly, there's a bullet point later on in this report which actually take us through how much investment losses we have yet to recognize and what's the impact of recognizing those investment losses. So the long and short is, if those two factors were to be met, unless they were offset by investment gains that we may have, for example, for 2012-13, I understand that the return, at least for the first 6 months of the year, have been way in excess of 1/2 of the assumed rate of 7.75. So unless we have more of those returns which are in excess of the assumed rate for the coming in the next 6 months period, otherwise I would have expected that the unfunded liability for the plan would continue to go up.
And maybe this is stepping forward, but how far does this go until we start talking about, are we paying a benefit that's too high for what our retirement system is making? Is there any discussion about that? I know that's real politically incorrect to talk about, but I mean, when you keep your unfunded liability keeps tracking up year in and year out, it looks like what you just said here, it's going to continue for a period of time, period of years. At what time do you start saying, well, you know what, we have to look at the benefits that we pay out. Maybe they're in excess of what this system can handle. Is there any discussion about that? Or is that something nobody wants to talk about?
Well, I think Supervisor Pinches, one of the answers is that the Retirement Board, as I mentioned earlier in the earlier comments, continues to look at the funding of the pension benefit. The Board of Retirement doesn't set the benefit levels.
That's my point. I mean, but at some point, somebody's got to look at it and say maybe this benefit level is too high for what the system will make.
Well, and the Board of Retirement will look, as Andy mentioned, the Board of Retirement will look in a year or so at the actuarial assumed rate of return and make a decision on that rate, and they will look at sometime this year the amortization schedule and the funding policy for the system as well. So those are factors under the control of the Board of Retirement that they will continue to be looking at.
I guess my question is, are they discussing that, or is it? I mean, it seems to me everybody, when they look at the economics of today, they say, well, we're just going to sit back and wait till things get better. And I don't think that's a good business philosophy or even an economic philosophy in the future. Well, at some point in time when you see this actuarial creeping up, and from Mr. Young's statements today, that's going to continue for I don't know how many years on out. At some point in time, you say, look, we're paying benefits out here that is more than this system will sustain. When does that discussion even start, not alone making a decision?
Yeah, I think, like I said in my introductory remark, in this report, we are primarily dealing with members in the current tiers. Now, of course, the board will remember that in the last quarter of calendar 2012, you went through looking at plan benefit design studies, and one of the consideration, of course, has been towards a more sustainable benefit formula. So as a result, you make some decisions. There was a formula that the state has put together, generally referred to as the Cal-Pepper formula. And in addition to adopting the formula, you have also decided to reduce the cost of living adjustment that are currently available to our current members at 3%, drawing it all the way down to 0%. So we do anticipate that as the new employees are hired to replace the current employees because they are put into a lesser benefit tier for retirement purposes, that the cost of the plan for the system, for the county as a whole, will come down. However, the part which is very difficult to predict what kind of savings that would bring to the table is the fact that the catch associated with any time you implement a benefit formula and it's only applied to new employees is that you really have to hire those new employees to drive down the average cost of the plan. But as you are aware, if you look at the table that we have in the report, which talks about how many new employees, how many active employees we have from the last several years, the only thing that we can observe from that table is that the number of active employees have continuously come down for the last several years. So at least from your actuary, it's hard for us to know when the hiring will start to pick up, when the economy will improve, and when the hiring will pick up. But definitely, I believe the Board of Supervisors, the employer, has already taken actions to implement the Cal-Pepper formula, and you have scrutinized plan design features, which can even provide you with more cost reductions, such as cost of living adjustments. All of that personally within your purview, but but outside of the purview of the retirement board, for example. So I think that those positive actions have been taken.
Supervisor Judy.
So I agree that the PEPRA pension employees, those hired after January 2013, are not contributing as much to the growing deficit of the unfunded liability. But we're all still contributing because the assumed rate of return is clearly too high. And in your report on page 9, you say that in the last 6 years, which I noticed you took a fairly good year in terms of returns and started with 2007 instead of starting with 2006 or 5. But with starting in 2006, where there was almost a 17% rate of return, by including that year in those last 6 years, you say it averaged a market value return of 4.02%. And what I'm not clear from the report is, was that the gain in the market value of the fund before expenses, or was that after expenses? Because there are expenses for the retirement board hires managers to manage the funds. The retirement board has staff that it pays for. So is this 4% return before those expenses or after those expenses?
The return is reported on page 9 of the report, net of all expenses. So that would be net of investment expenses as well as administration expenses.
So does administrative expenses include all expenses of the retirement board?
No, it includes all of the fees. I'm sorry, the returns that are reported are net of fees, which are investment-related fees. They are not net of the other administrative costs for the system. So it's only investment-related fees that they are net of.
So if you were to net out all costs of the retirement board to function, and that would include any fees it pays to the County of Mendocino, if it pays any fees to the County of Mendocino for issuing retirement checks, I don't know if they do, what would be the net return?
I don't have that information right now, but what the expenses of the retirement system are set by statute to not to exceed 21/100% of the actuarial accrued liability, which is approximately $900,000 or so on an annual basis, or $2 million, whichever is greater. The current administrative budget for MSERA is less than the 21/100%. So it's less than, it's around $900,000. It's actually less than that. It's about $800,000. So you would have to take $800,000 off of the the returns. So you would be taking away maybe 21/100% or something, so 21 basis points, so maybe somewhere take 4.02 and subtract 0.2 from it or something like that, perhaps. It's a fairly small amount, although it does exist in there. All of the funds, all of the fees that are reported, the performance fees reported by MSERA are net of fees. And just for information, I did bring along some information for you that the 10-year annualized return as of June 30, 2012, the 10-year return was 6.94%. That's on an annualized basis for 10 years, again, starting on June 30, 2012. For the past 3 years, the annualized return for the fund on a 3-year basis, fiscal year, was 11.35% per year. And on a calendar year basis, starting on December 31st, 2012, the 3 years going beyond that was 8.57%. And the 1-year return in 2012 was 14.53%, which exceeded the benchmark that MSERA has by about 1.5%. And those are net of fee figures. We obviously report on a fiscal year basis, and what Andy referred to was the fact that you would expect with a 7.75% annualized return to earn somewhere around 2% per quarter in the third quarter of 2012. So at the period from July to September, the fund earned 4.81%, and in the fourth quarter of 2012, so the period of October to December, the fund earned 2.78%. So We are on track, to meet or exceed the actuarial assumed rate of return this year, but we're only halfway through. And Vice Chair Pinches and I were having a discussion earlier about the economy, and to say that we have any reasonable expectation that we're going to get, that this is going to repeat itself, I think would be very, very optimistic. But we sure hope it will repeat itself and give us a good return this year. But again, we're only halfway through it.
So to clarify the numbers you just gave us, you said you had an annualized return of 6.94 over a 10-year period. Now, was that
6.94% on a 10-year period? That is a fiscal year period through June 30, 2012.
And was that net of all costs?
That's net of investment fees only.
So not net of the 800,000?
No.
Of the annual costs?
No, just the investment fees.
So could the retirement board, we request the retirement board give us their annualized returns net after all costs for the last, I'd like to see the last 10 years.
I'm sure that's a figure that can be provided.
Well, I'm sure it can be provided, and I don't hear Mr. White saying he has any objection to providing that information. And I would like to inform the board at I was going to report on this during supervisor reports. At our last meeting, the Board of Retirement, as a policy, even though it's allowed 0.21 of the accrued liability or $2 million, whichever is greater, by policy the board chose to adopt the 0.21 as our standard, and that's actually less than half of the $2 million allowed for administrative expenses. So the board is, I think, very aware of the need to be fiscally prudent, and has, by policy limited themselves to less than 50% of the allowed administrative expenses. Now the board can revisit that, but it's kind of set a standard for itself that we are going to be mindful of our administrative costs going forward. So, I think that was a positive sign.
And you can continue, but I'd just like to make a comment. In my tenure watching, I've never sat on a retirement board, been watching this, the county's unfunded liability in my memory is increased from about 25 million up to now it's 131 million. We all know that can continue, and now I hear today that, well, likely for the few years going on, it's going to keep going up. And what we're assuming is we're not assuming we're going to have another major downturn in the markets, and that's a pretty positive assumption in my estimation. So it really concerns me that it's going to take something more than what we're doing. We just can't. And there's only really one thing left, and that's totally reviewing the payout, the benefit side of the retirement system. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but it's a reality I think we're faced. And if we don't do it, but it seems to me like there's no discussion of that even. That kind of concerns me, because if you put a graph of this unfunded liabilities, it's going up, and what I hear today is it's no time in the near future, and I mean several years, is it going to start turning down. And so how high does it go before, how big does a balloon get before the balloon busts? So anyways, it's really concerning to me, but I think, everybody's putting their money and their cards on this pepper and everything, but I don't think it might be a fix, but I don't think it's a solution. Retirement systems are for the long term. They're for generations. And I don't so sure that we have this system set up for that. Everybody makes kind of policies. I guess it'd be easy for me to say, well, do I really care as long as it stays funded until I'm retired or till I die? But we got to set this system up to where it's going to be here for the future of the county, and that's not decades, it's generations, and maybe centuries as far as that goes. And I don't see this system not even looking in that direction. But that's just my opinion. Supervisor McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think you're absolutely right with your concern regarding the unfunded liability, and I think that's the greatest threat to the solvency of Mendocino County. So all the decisions we've made to balance the budget and try and get expenditures in line with revenue have really not cured the county's financial situation, because we are very vulnerable to the unfunded retirement obligation increasing, and it could increase dramatically if we take another economic collapse like we saw in 08 and 09, and that we've still not recovered from. And that was preceded by the dot-com bust in about 2001. So we continue to be very vulnerable, and I think that's why we have to keep making the best decisions we can going forward. But unfortunately, decisions were made in the past where we're kind of locked in to benefits that were promised when maybe the financial projections were a little rosier. And the PEPRA reform is a benefit that we'll primarily see as it applies to new employees going forward. It has a fairly limited impact on our current employees, and even those fairly modest attempts to achieve some savings there, I believe, are pretty much all under legal challenge currently. So we're not even sure we'll get the benefit that we're hoping we might get as it applies to trying to limit the spiking and those kinds of things. And I would just ask, is that, in a nutshell, kind of an accurate statement?
Well, I think, Supervisor, that it is, though I would point out that the legal challenges don't extend into the county of Mendocino.
Although based on the outcome in those counties where suits have been filed, presumably those outcomes would apply here as well.
To the extent that the employees have the same benefit, it would. But I don't know that the lawsuits that are being filed and the issues being discussed in them, although I'm not an expert on the issues, but the way I see them right now, I think that the issues don't necessarily apply to what the circumstances here in Mendocino.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, I'm sorry that we got a little bit off your presentation, but if you want to continue.
All right. So we talk about the change in the unfunded liability. So why don't we also take a look at the contribution rate impact? So that's follow very closely the items that we have already looked at on page.
Now, what you're saying is let's look a little more closely about the bill with the retirement system.
I think I want to, maybe before I go there, I want to reassure the Board of Supervisors that the Board of Retirement share are concerned, because for 2 years in a row, they have asked the CECO company to provide them with a schedule which shows them, even if all the assumptions were to be met, how would the unfunded liability change from 1 year to the next. Now that we have provided that information, like I said, 2 years in a row to the Board of Retirement, we expect within the next several months to sit down with the Board of Retirement and seriously go through this relatively long amortization period that we have been referring to, not just this year, but also in our last year's presentation of 27 years. But make no mistake, this is a pay me now or pay me later. So the fact that we have a 27-year amortization period has given rise to the contribution rate as they are set in this year's valuation. So certainly, if we were to shorten up the amortization period, we would stop the unfunded liability for going up every year for the next several years. But that would also mean, though, that the contributions that would otherwise be required for the county to make using a shorter amortization period, just like the mortgage on our houses, would be expected to be bigger. So we would definitely expect to have a heated discussion with the board, trying to go through the pros and cons with the Board of Retirement as to what are the upsides and what are the downsides associated with different periods for amortization. So that's something that we expect to have a discussion before the next valuation for 2013.
Like you say, it's pay me now or pay me later.
Unfortunately, that's the way it works. That's the way it works. Okay.
Continue.
Yeah. So if you would please turn to page 16 of the report for me, because on this page we have tried to take
Page
the
16.
16, correct. So
Page
this is on section
60?
2, page 16, 1-6.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm on chart 14 on page 16 of the report. So the question is, what is the change in the contribution rate? So I want to remind the board, though, that, again, the contribution rate that we have provided on the first line, the 23.57, is really an average rate. So right now, as you know, you have members enroll in the general plans, you have members enroll in the safety as well as the probation plans. So none of these employer contribution rates amount to exactly the 23.57. This is really an average rate calculated based on the payroll for each of those plans and each of those tiers, and the contribution rate that were approved by the Board of Retirement and the Board of Supervisors last year. So it works out to be 23.57% of pay based on the proportion of payroll as of today. In dollar terms, it's about $13.3 million. Now, if you look at the contribution rate we are recommending as part of this year's valuation, it's going up by about 2% of payroll. In dollar terms, about $1.1 million to 25.65% of payroll, or $14.5 million. Now, if you look at the line item for each and every change in the contribution rate, you will recognize that we have more or less the same items that have caused the unfunded liability to change the way it did on page 38 of the report. Now, the only item which is new, and again, we have very briefly talked about that already, is on line item number 4. So this goes back to the fact that when we developed the unfunded liability contribution rate for the 2011 valuation, an assumption was made that the payroll for the employer, for the county, as well as the court and the other special districts would grow at an annual rate of 4%. But that did not happen. During the course of 2011-2012, because of the reduction in headcount and because of the salary concessions that the employees have made, as a result, there's actually a reduction in the payroll for about 12% of pay or so. So instead of going up by 4, it actually came down by about 11%, 12% or so. So if you take all of that into consideration, and because we have the more or less the same amount of unfunded liability, remember we start off the year at about 124, we end the year at about 126, more or less the same amount of the unfunded liability, but we have to take that unfunded liability, pay that down, but now using a smaller payroll base. So as a result of spreading the payment over a smaller payroll base, the contribution rate itself is going to have to go up by about 2%. So if you look at all the experience for 2011, 2012, depends on how you want to stack up the different changes. You can almost argue that the one item that can be used to explain the change in the rate, the increase in the rate, is the fact that because the payroll did not go up, there's an increase in the unfunded liability rate of 2%, and coincidentally, the change in the contribution rate that we are recommending in this valuation is also going up by about 2.08, call it 2.1% of pay.
So the county, I say ours, employer rate, we're going to get a bill for $1,178,000 more this year than it was last year.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Kyle, you got that?
He's probably thankful it's not higher.
Yeah.
That's right.
I am.
Yeah. Now, like I indicated, the detail rates for employer by each plan, COI general, the tiers, safety, the among all the tiers, as well as probation are provided starting on page 14 of the report, which I won't go through in a lot of detail. But if you look at the following page 17 now, so let's take a look at the members rate and see how that have changed from last year to this year. So unlike the story on the employer, at least the contribution rate for the employees actually have only changed on the margin a little bit, going up slightly from 9.73% of payroll for roughly $5.5 million to 9.76% of payroll, still about $5.5 million. So in other words, unlike the employer's rate, the change in the member's rate is only about $16,000, as you can see on this table. And the reason why the board may remember is that the way the county retirement law is structured right now is such that anytime there are any changes in the unfunded liability which cause the contribution rate in this year in particular for the county to go up by 2% of pay, none of that change in the unfunded liability can be shared with the employees. So in other words, when the times were bad, such as where we're at today, when you earn less than the assumed rate, none of that cost increase due to the change in the unfunded liability can be shared with the employees. Likewise, when the times were good back maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when the investment returns were coming in at higher than the assumed rate, back then 8%, none of that decrease in the rate because the fund earned more than the assumed rate can be shared with the employees either. So in this case, it's really the payment of the normal cost rate, which are all based on assumptions which are being used to set the members' rate. So that's the reason why anytime that there are fluctuations in the employer's rate, at least if you look at if there's any silver lining in the whole process, it would be the members' rate. The members' rate tend to be very stable because it's set based on just assumptions. They are not impacted by any good experience or, for that matter, any bad experience. Okay.
Is there anything more?
Now, I think the only other item that I have been
You basically got to the bottom line.
Yeah, that's right. Now, the only item is because we are sitting on investment losses, so let's go back to Section 1, Roman numeral 3, III, one last time. Just want to provide a full disclosure, full picture as to the point that Supervisor McGowan has asked early on. And because we are sitting on investment losses, so if you look at the third bullet point from the top, and so I'm going to try to read this into the minutes. So as indicated in Section 2, which is the smooth value of assets section of the report, the total unrecognized investment losses as of June 30, 2012 is $23.2 million. So because of the smoothing process, and because we just had a very bad year on a market return basis, it was coming in at around -1% or so. As a result, we are sitting on investment losses that have not yet been recognized in this valuation and will be recognized in the next 4 years. Now, if we skip over to the second paragraph, you will see that the $23.2 million is about 6.8% of the market value of assets. Now, unless we have investment gains or other favorable actuarial experience after June 30, 2012, if those investment losses have to be recognized in the next 4 years, if they were to be recognized hypothetically in this year's valuation, the funded ratio would drop from 74% or so to 70%. So the contribution rate that we were looking at a minute ago, the 25.65% of payroll, would have actually gone up to about 27.7%. So in other words, if we have to take all the experience that we are aware of, including, for example, the market losses, the $23 million that we have not yet recognized, and bring that into this rate setting process, this is a hypothetical, then the contribution rate for the county will go up by an additional 2% of payroll. So we're not making that recommendation, but at least for funding purposes, I think for budgeting purposes, you ought to be aware that that may potentially happen unless offset by other favorable investments experience or other actuarial experience down the road. Okay.
Is that it?
That's it for the current years, yes.
That's all we have, Mr. Supervisor. And again, we have your action today is to adopt the rates in this report as well as the rates that are in the addendum letter, which the letter rates, the rates in the letter are for your new employees for the fiscal year July 1 to June 30. And again, they're not included in the big actuarial report because they didn't exist. Basically, that pension formula didn't exist at the time this report was put together. So you have two different reports to adopt in your action today. Next year, when we come back to you, it'll be back into the one report.
Okay, I'm going to go to public expression. Does any members of the public want to speak on this? Sure, come forward.
Yes, good morning again. Thank you, Vice Chair Pinches. If I could have a little bit more than 3 minutes, I think we could cover a couple of my points here. As I'm on the retirement board, as you know, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. I don't think you really don't have any wiggle room on the recommended total rate of 25.65 and the dollar amount of 14.5 million. You pretty much have to pay that bill. If I could use a metaphor, and this speaks to what Supervisor Pinches was talking about, it's almost as if this board were a company, the new owners of a company that's been in business for a while. The previous owners incurred all this debt, incurred all these liabilities, incurred these policies that led to these liabilities, and now it's on your doorstep. You weren't the owners of the company when these liabilities were incurred, when the Slavin study was adopted, when we went on a hiring binge, when we started to spike pension benefits, et cetera. But you're presented with that problem now. So you have to pay this bill now. What has the retirement board done that's good? Well, Retirement Board Stevens, myself, and others have been very proactive in doing things like having the actuary come up with a schedule for seeing how the unfunded liability will grow over time, and getting things like the market value of assets as a line item in and of itself. The smooth actuarial rate of return, as you know, was a good way of hiding losses. You could be sitting on losses, and that smoothing formula was a good way of hiding things. Well, Retirement Board Member Stevens in particular has been very proactive in wanting us to declare what these were and what the effect of negative amortization is going to be over time on our assets. The other thing I wanted to mention is I bumped into Dave Eberly of SEIU over lunch, and he asked a very good question that I think is on the minds of many employees who are wondering, hey, if the stock market is up 15%, why aren't we getting a bump in COLAs or anything like this? And the answer is that on section 1, Roman numeral 6 on this report, the return on the valuation of assets, when all is said and done, when you factor in all the unfunded liabilities and what have you, what is the real rate of return? And the real rate of return is 6.69%. So even though you could look in the newspaper, in the Wall Street Journal, and see that the market is up, when you take everything in consideration, the real return on the valuation of assets is a lot less, and that's what we have to take into account. As far as planning purposes for this Board of Retirement is concerned, I think probably the number one thing that you have to take in mind is the reduction of the payroll. We now have 1,069 active members, workers in the county, supporting the retirement benefits of 1,217 retirees. That's huge. That's a ratio of non-active to active members of 1.47. And the effect of amortization on the prior year's unfunded liability over a smaller than expected payroll, Andy has accurately described on page 16, line 4. So as your payroll contracts, you're going to have this huge effect of amortization on the prior year's amortization schedule. And then finally, the big elephant in the room is the IRS. What is the effect of the abuse of the excess earnings policy with the IRS? That's a huge unknown. So for planning purposes, what does this board needs to take into effect? I'm not a lawyer, but the IRS could very well say that Section 415 of the code regards this payment for retiree health care as compensation. And they could hit us with the bill of upwards of $30 million. So again, that's a huge unknown. That's a worst case scenario, but that's something for planning purposes you all need to consider. Thank you.
Any other members of the public want to speak on this? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Final comments, or I would like to entertain a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, we might first see, I'm curious if our presenters have any response to the public comment. Otherwise, I am prepared to make a motion.
I don't have anything to add to the comments.
So the one thing that I think should be made clear, because it kind of indicates based on the agenda summary that this is presented for our approval, and in point of fact, we don't really have a choice unless we want to pay more, is my understanding. And I might confirm that with County Council. It's the responsibility of the Board of Retirement to establish the contribution rate, and they essentially tell us what the contribution rate will be as a percentage of payroll, and then we simply ratify that in effect.
This is County Council Tom Parker, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Yes, it is the Board of Retirement's responsibility as a matter of statute to set these rates, and it is something of a basically a ministerial obligation on this board to formally adopt.
And so, consistent with that explanation, I will move the recommended action.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I have a question for the county council. So if the board felt that the retirement board was acting irresponsibly in continuing to adopt an assumed rate of return of 7.75 and using that for the basis for the contribution rate, what authority or responsibility does the Board of Supervisors have?
Well, the Board of Supervisors would have to consider if it so strongly disagreed with that or any other element of the formula used by the Board of Retirement. The Board of Supervisors would have to consider whether or not it was going to go to the extent of taking some legal action in a worst-case scenario, trying to identify on what grounds they were challenging the Board of Retirement's calculations.
That's your question.
Well, short of taking legal action, the board, Board of Supervisors, if it so chose, could say, Board of Retirement, with all due respect, we think the 7.75% assumed rate of return is overly optimistic. We choose to pay more than the contribution rate that you've established based on that assumed rate of return. We think it would be more realistic to adopt a lower assumed rate of return, and then the board, if it chose, could calculate out what that contribution rate would be, and I think unilaterally could then adopt a higher contribution rate and then pay the bill accordingly. But that would potentially have the cost of adding millions of dollars to the county's annual cost.
Yes, absolutely. You could, the Board of Supervisors could always approach the Board of Retirement and express their concern about the assumed rate of return and make a suggestion as to what the Board of Supervisors thinks it should be and why it should be that. The Board of Supervisors, as you say, Supervisor, could also decide they want to pay more because they feel that is an appropriate use of county monies and policy decision. And so notwithstanding the rates established by the Board of Retirement, if you want to pay more, then that's your choice.
And I'm not recommending that. We could if we wanted to.
Well, so I would just say, to me, it's not a matter of wanting to pay more. The fact is this board will continue to pay more every year because it will always be given a larger unfunded liability bill, and the county pays 100% of the unfunded liability. If there was a lower assumed rate of return that was more realistic, the unfunded liability would grow at a slower rate, and which is what the county has to pay, but the normal costs would be reflected to be more accurate, and that would be split between the employees and the employer. And so it's really not a matter of a choice here. I mean, either the county pays 100% or the county pays a portion of it and the employees pay a portion of it.
Supervisor McCown.
Thank you, Mr.
This
Chair.
is both your second
I think we're
response.
getting a bit off the topic of the motion, and I think it's a worthwhile topic to explore in depth. And we could have that discussion at a future time. But you know, one point I'd make is the investment that is made is for the long term. So if you look at a 3-year window, a 5-year window, or even a 10-year window, it may not be an accurate reflection of what the investment rate of return will be over the long haul. And that's the nature of our investment. So I think I'll leave it at there for today, but, you know, I think it would be very appropriate to have that discussion. Certainly it would be pertinent during budget hearings if at no other time, because it'll have a big impact on what the county is doing with its limited amount of discretionary revenue.
So that's the end of the discussion. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 I'll vote no.
I vote aye. All those opposed?
No.
Supervisor Jordy votes no. The motion carries 3-1 with Supervisor Hamburg absent. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute, and I mean a 5-minute break, not a 7-minute break, but a 5-minute break.
Good luck, Mr. Chair.
We're Okay, we're going to move on down to agenda item 6B. This is adoption of resolution implementing provisions of Assembly Bill 2284, Chesbro and Vehicle Code 2810.2 in Mendocino County. This is sponsored by Supervisors Jordy and McCowan are the sponsors. One of you two want to introduce this item?
Oh, go ahead.
Supervisor Jordy, introduce the item.
So this is consistent with the board's position of support for Assemblymember Chesbro's AB 2284, which is to regulate the transport of irrigation pipe onto resource lands in a county. And as the law was passed, it requires each county to adopt a resolution to opt into the enforcement of that law. And so this is our bringing it forward so it can take effect here in Mendocino County.
Okay. Any other board comments? Want to make comments on this?
Vice Chair Pinches, I think we've made all the comments on it when it was legislation going through Sacramento, and certainly I support this, and I don't think anything else, I just don't need to say anything else. I'm in support of it and ready to go forward with the motion.
Yeah. Supervisor McCown?
Mr. Chair, I agree. This is simply consistent with our previous actions in support of the legislation and urging the governor to sign it into law. Now we have an opportunity to actually implement it, and I would suggest we hear from the public, and then I'm sure we can have a motion.
That's what we'll do. Any members of the public want to speak on this? I see our sheriffs here.
Good morning again, and thank you. This is an important bill. It's not exactly what we were looking for, but watching a bill go through Sacramento is like watching sausage being made. I learned that. And this does give us the basic tools for our state and federal lands of our law enforcement officers. If we see a vehicle transporting irrigational supplies, it's not illegal to transport them, but it gives us a probable cause to stop and investigate. It's the same way that we have the legal ability to stop and investigate a truck hauling cattle, or at Christmas time, any vehicle hauling more than 4 Christmas trees in a national forest. So this is another tool in our toolbox that is going to hopefully decrease the amount of illegal marijuana grows on public land and large timber tracts of land. And I really appreciate last year this board writing a letter of support to West Chesbro and to the governor. And the governor and I have talked about this bill, and he basically was of the attitude, anything that helps us accomplish our mission is what he was willing to do. So thank you very much. Your letter meant a lot. And I see that Madeline Mello's here, and her late husband is actually mentioned in the bill. And I think it's very fitting that Jerry Mello's name is in the bill as a person who tirelessly fought for the the elimination of marijuana off public land and off large timber tracts. And I appreciate your support in this bill. And when we were in Sacramento, Madeline, thank you very much.
Any other members of the public want to speak?
Madeline Mello, Fort Bragg. I'd just like to thank Supervisor Dan Jurdy and Supervisor John McGowan for bringing this forward to the Board of Supervisors. And of course, I strongly support that you vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members want to speak? Okay, bring it back to the board. Something I'd like to talk real quickly about. I think what had a lot of interest in generating this bill was when we had our off-site meeting in Kogelo, and I think it was me that brought up the idea, well, why don't we try to restrict the usage? And we talked about doing checkpoints and things like that. But this is what resulted in it. There's parts of this bill that, as like the sheriff said, is not really happy with. But I think it's a good tool to, at least it's a start. I would hope to see it be a tool that we really use for the people going in and out of our national forest. So I will support this. Supervisor,
So I'll offer a motion to adopt the resolution as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor.
And I would just add that this is an outgrowth of your suggestion regarding checkpoints on the national forest. It falls far short of what we were trying to do, but what we have does result from your suggestion.
So with that, any other, I guess we can vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried with unanimous, or carried for with Supervisor Hamburg absent. So with that, thank you. Thank you, Madeline, for coming over from the coast. Okay, we're going to move back to agenda item 5C.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to also acknowledge the work of Ruth Valenzuela on this bill, which was also instrumental.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to, this is agenda item 5C, informational presentation on the development of the Agricultural Lands Discharge Program by the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, addressing anticipated program structure, impacts to agriculture, and initial local efforts to assist with the eventual implementation of the program. Chuck Morse, our Agriculture Commissioner, is a sponsor. Go ahead, Chuck.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, County Council, CEO, and staff. I appreciate the opportunity to come here this morning and just give an introduction to a program that will be implemented in the next year or two on basically all the farmers in the North Coast region. It's going to be called the Agricultural Lands Discharge Program, coming from the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. This program will have significant financial impacts on our farmers, requiring additional record keeping and monitoring, and many of the operations will probably be forced to institute changes in their operations and management practices on the ground. So today I just wanted to give a quick overview of what's actually a fairly complicated program that's coming down the pike. And there's real no official draft out yet. We just have a working document. The regional board is attempting to work through all of the issues that are being brought up at this point. So today I just wanted to give a real quick history of how we got here, a short synopsis of the process that we've been going through, a look very briefly again at the working draft version that's out there, and some possible solutions as we see them at this point. So the history of the whole agricultural lands programs, I think probably most of the supervisors are aware of it, but agriculture was granted 10-year waivers at a time by the State Water Quality Control Board back when I believe the Clean Water Act was first passed, or possibly statute prior to that. At any rate, there was a change at the state board level, and the 10-year waivers were canceled in essence. So the first region to try to adopt a program to address discharges from agriculture was the central region in California, the largest region, from Kern County to Shasta County, all the Sierra foothill counties that drain to the Central Valley, and all of our coastal counties in California that drain to the Central Valley as well. So That program ended up being very heavily focused on monitoring, and the initial concept was discharges or any impairment induced into surface waters. It's the regional board's responsibility to minimize those or mitigate those, or see to it that those discharges are mitigated. Since that, basically the Region 5, I think, is the Central Valley, the largest one. The first one, I believe they came on board about 2003, roughly, with their program. Again, very heavily monitoring focused, water monitoring focused for pesticides and nutrients, et cetera. Since then, 3 or 4 of the regional boards have been successful in getting their agricultural lands programs in place. And at roughly summer, fall of 2011, the North Coast Regional Board decided they were going to take on the task of having the same thing occur up on the North Coast. Most of the processes and implementations of these regional plans have gone fairly smoothly. Some have not. Some to the extent where the state board had to step in and actually suspend certain elements of a plan that had been implemented by the regional board. So there's variability across the board throughout the state as we're seeing these programs and plans trying to be designed and implemented. So a quick synopsis of the process that we've seen so far. Like I said, since summer, fall of 2011, we're North Coast region, so Sonoma, Mendocino, Humboldt, Del Norte, across to Siskiyou, a portion of Trinity is in there, a portion of Modoc as well. So a very large region, very diverse region, diverse environmentally, agriculturally, obviously, as well. Given this diversity, the North Coast Regional Board divided the region into 3 sub-regions, trying to capture, again regionally, the nuances or the issues particular to various areas of agriculture. So we've been attending numerous meetings, both our subgroup or regional meetings, and then the Regional Water Quality Control Board will pull together all 3 sub-regions into super meetings, if you will. We've had many meetings over the last year and a half trying to work through this process. We're not there yet. We're getting there. The regional board has set a timetable for itself, so we seem to be progressing on in this program at times when there seems to be questions and issues that really don't appear to be getting addressed, quite frankly. For Mendocino County, we have had and continue to have a very strong contingent representing us at the table. In addition to myself, I'd like to first give credit to Devin Jones with Mendocino County Farm Bureau. She's been a real driver and coordinator and organizer for us on this topic, and credit there. Fish Friendly Farming with Marcus has been there the whole time, asking very pertinent, good questions, and she's a fantastic resource. From a grower perspective, we have Dave Cobal, one of the vineyard managers from Fetzer, and he's adding a down-to-earth perspective that I think the board appreciates, the Regional Water Board appreciates. The Potter Valley Irrigation District has been represented. Janet Pauley and Steve, I apologize, I forget his last name.
Elliott.
Thank you, Steve Elliott. Yes, the manager there, have both participated. Our medicinal marijuana industry as well. Julia Carrera has been there, and again, another valuable component as far as the regional board is concerned to have her at the table. And her input has been, it's been enlightening, I think, for the regional board. Going on to what the working draft or what the program looks like at this point in time, it's going to be an ag lands conditional waiver, so certain conditions will have to be met by all operations. Right now, it's currently sitting just in a scope and framework sort of document that we're all working on and trying to refine and make it workable. But at the end of the day, there's going to be one plan for the entire region. So yes, we have our subgroups, and the Regional Water Board is receiving input from the subgroups, but they're going to be tasked with writing a plan that covers all those counties that I listed, us included, obviously. So two basic elements to it. There's a list of findings, and that summarizes the state board's authority, the overall scope and need for the program, things like that, an explanation of the required actions, and then a list of actions that the regional board is expecting to see, and those can include the administration of it. There's a tiering structure built in, and I'll talk about that just a little bit more. Water quality performance standards will be laid out. Discharge prohibitions will be laid out as well. The details of a water quality management plan that all of the farmers will be required to generate and follow. Enrollment into the program and other processes. So the tier structure that we're envisioning right now, it's not a bad decision in the sense that it allows operations that are assessed to be less of a risk or having less discharges could enter into the program at a lower, i.e. better tier. And it also gives those operations that maybe have more discharges at this point, it incentivizes a little bit to allow them a place to get to. And we're envisioning, or water board staff has told us that there are possibly going to be a reduction in reporting periods. Apparently there's an issue on trying to lower the fees that their legal has expressed to us, so we're still pushing for that. Don't know if we're going to be able to get any of that. So anyway, in trying to incentivize the whole thing, to get some cooperation back and forth between the farmers and the water board. So there's a lot more to the working draft on this, but basically to put a finish to this element of the presentation, just kind of leave you with this. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. There are numerous legacy questions that we collectively, just from the Mendocino group, have brought up that appear not to be really being addressed. And I know the water board staff is working hard, and they're trying to be interactive with all of us in this process. But again, it's a little frustrating from our perspective to get what seems like some fundamental baseline questions, or those questions remain unanswered. So a little bit of frustration there, but we're trying to work through it with them on this. So the possible solutions that we see, the good news is that many regions have implemented their plans to this point. So there are examples out there for this regional water board to go look at and pick the elements that they either know are working or they're attracted to as a possible solution for us up here. This regional water board appears to be leaning towards a best management practices sort of implementation with third-party verifiers on farm to make sure that the practices are being implemented, make sure they're being met, make sure they're working, that sort of thing. So that's a good news. The kind of the not so good news is the regional board appears to be holding fast on at least some sort of level of monitoring, water monitoring, which is extremely expensive. And all it tells you is that somewhere upstream there's been a discharge of something that you have monitored for. So if a water quality problem arrives upstream of a farm, goes through the farm, and then a monitoring station is below that farm, obviously they've picked up a hit or a positive on their monitoring, and this program turns around and looks at the agricultural operation and basically makes them defend themselves that they didn't. So there are inherent problems as we see it with the monitoring. But again, we're working through that. We hope to hopefully sway the board a little bit on that one. Given this backdrop, the possible solutions that we're seeing, again, will utilize those independent third-party verifiers, and there are just numerous models out there that are available for the board, and many members that are at the table at these meetings have repeatedly brought forward these models, like fish-friendly farming, or the Shelley Janik with the RCD found a Michigan program which they implemented statewide. There's Lodi Rules. There's the Central Coast Vineyard Group has a program in place. There's numerous models out there, and locally here we have talked about actually trying to bring a solution to the board, to the Regional Water Board, to just present them with a possible solution that utilizes the process that I just laid out. So I don't know if they'll buy off on it or not, but that's going to be our attempt. And in that vein, locally here for Mendocino County, participants here, we've talked about possibly entering into a partnership or somehow developing a local plan that would address the needs for the farmers. This is going to be a fee-for-service situation for the farmers to develop a farm plan to get that independent verification, and then they're going to have reporting requirements. So we're looking to try and utilize some local resources. Our department already helps with the fish-friendly farming inspections, so certain staff that I have is already familiar with that element or that type of inspection. I've been in discussion with Mendocino County RCD, with the Farm Bureau a little bit, and possibly the technical assistance for the NRCS would possibly be a valuable partner as well. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now with this, and it's a fairly big freight train that's coming for all of the farmers in this county. The only people who are exempt are if you're under another one of the regional board's programs. So if you have a confined animal permit or a facilities permit or something like that, then you're excluded from this. So that's I threw a lot at you, and it's a huge program, but I'll leave it at that and answer any questions you might want.
Vice Brown.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pinches, and I've been watching all this going on since I believe 98, 99, when the waivers process was no longer allowed. You did say, Ag Commissioner, and I just have to say one size does not fit all when you consider the region being looked at by our regional board. Many different circumstances. But you did say that you had unanswered questions. You've sent them in, but they're yet to be addressed, and I certainly, this board could help getting those questions answered, and I'd be willing to work with you on an agenda item to bring that forward with a letter to the regional board going through this process. So I wanted to put that out there, and in case you would like to come forward, we can help with that.
Okay. Go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you, Supervisor Brown.
I'm trying to rush this along for other reasons, but this was set as a 10-minute agenda item, so.
Some of the questions are very hard, if not impossible, to answer at this point, but they directly relate to what the program's going to be asking the farmers to measure and control. Mm-hmm. So it's a very frustrating situation where the process of getting the answers to some of these questions are multiple year programs.
I see.
I appreciate your offer, though, and we'll do what we can.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who want to speak on this? Come forward.
Thank you, Chair. Louis Bigfoot. As a reporter, I've been looking at the timber tract lands for years now, and Mendocino Coast Redwoods has their approval out for the next 80 years on their, and I'm totally against the 80 year. In fact, the 10 year is coming up approval on their sustainability and into the future and age class of tree, and I haven't heard a detailed discussion, but in terms of the water quality, they've used 12,000 gallons of herbicides in their hack and squirt process over time. It's in their document. Anybody can pull that up on the web, and is that part of the, and I know you're not supposed to answer anything, but I'd like to put that into the record that I would like an answer on that. I'd like to know how they're going to just kind of scoot through on this whole thing. In fact, I'd like to bring a halt to that whole process of hack and squirt. I'd like to eliminate the process. I'd like to have them phase out hack and squirt in their future plans, because they have no attempt to phase it out. They just figure it's good to go forever. And I will be showing photographs over at the Mendocino Environmental Center that date back to 89 and 90 when LPGP was hacking and squirting their way to heaven.
Come on, Lewis, you got to have us come in with some updated photographs. I remember those photographs.
Yeah.
That was almost 20 years ago.
It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. Hack and squirt is hack and squirt. In fact, one thing that really concerns me as well is that it leaves all of this dead and woody debris on the ground into time and creating a fire danger, which is not assessed in this document as well, the fire danger, and that did not come out by Cal. Yesterday's by Chris Rowney, who's a former LP author of the plans that allowed hack and squirt to go forward, Chris Rowney. And he's my friend. But anyway, I'd just like to add that in the document, and I'd also like to mention that Walmart you can walk into Walmart and buy herbicides at an uncontrolled rate. There's no overview of this. I got that from Dave Beginston himself, your predecessor. He was actually upset with that because there's no control on Walmart. Can you imagine? You can just go into Walmart and squirt your way to happiness. Okay, thank you.
Nor any other nursery.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. And I do agree to a little bit of an extent with the previous speaker's concerns. I mean, that's been one of our concerns from agricultural's perspective is, looking at water quality programs as a whole should be sort of the entire puzzle and not just one piece at a time. What Chuck didn't mention, and I want to give him kudos for, is the fact that this program started out specifically focused on irrigated lands. Within the second meeting that we had, it morphed into an agricultural lands program. Now that distinction basically went from isolating folks who used water for irrigation or frost control to including any agricultural operational lands. And at this point, that may or may not include dry land grazing. We don't know. There's no program right now. The State Water Board has been discussing developing a separate program for dry land grazing, but if that is included in this program, it's going to be significant, especially for Mendocino County, since we have quite a few acres in dry land grazing. So now that we're looking at both stormwater runoff and potential runoff or issues that may come up from the irrigational use in agriculture, I agree with Supervisor Brown. A one-size-fits-all approach is going to be very difficult to achieve, considering we have Easter lily growers up in Del Norte County, hay growers in Siskiyou County that flood irrigate. We've got mostly deficit irrigated wine grapes here in the lower portion of the region. So it's going to be kind of a challenge to meet these objectives. And maybe to address one of the key questions that we haven't been able to come up with, and we've repeatedly asked the Regional Water Board, is do you have an idea of what we're trying to improve upon? I mean, the main concern down here in Mendocino County and most of the region is sediment. So we're looking at very natural erosive soils. How are we going to distinguish between natural sources of sedimentation versus actual sedimentation that may come off of agricultural operations? So that's been one of our key points is how do we know what we're trying to accomplish? And basically because we don't have a TMDL, which is a blessing and a curse simultaneously on a number of these watersheds in the region, we don't have something to kind of pinpoint as a target. So that's been one of our key questions. So with that, I think the biggest question at this point is a lot of cart before the horse. We haven't had a meeting since October. I don't think we have a meeting scheduled until midsummer for this year. So I agree with Chuck. I think we're going to be proponents and try to get some suggestions to the Regional Water Board, and perhaps that we can use Supervisor Brown's suggestion and encourage the Board of Supervisors to assist us with maybe getting some answers to the questions that we keep repetitively submitting to the Regional Water Board staff. So with that, thank you for hearing this item today.
Any other members of the public want to speak? Chuck, you got any final comments?
I don't at this time. I just, as the agenda summary indicates at the bottom there, I was looking for guidance from this board on any potential movement forward, or if there's any consternation.
Supervisor McCown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does seem that it would be appropriate sooner rather than later to have a letter such as Supervisor Brown is suggesting, and let's try and get a little clarity. And, you know, one of the concerns here is we essentially are in a position where what is considered legal is being rewritten by state regulatory agencies, not the state legislature. And so, you know, what I'm hearing is that this program is just undergoing a massive expansion of the way they intend to apply it because a state regulator in Sacramento thought they wanted to do it that way. You know, there seems to be no awareness that economic activity at every level is kind of threatened in this state, and there's already been a decline in many of the impacts that we're trying to control based on the economy stalling out. So the whatever benefit, it's not only what are we trying to improve upon, but how much do we think we're going to improve? And you know, when it comes to, if sediment is the big concern, one thing that remains completely unregulated are rural private subdivision roads that are unpaved roads, and I'm not aware that they're under any regulatory authority at all to limit or control the sedimentation that comes off of those roads. And it, you know, it impacts air quality and it impacts water quality. So, you know, I think we might be in a position where the state's going after a gnat with a sledgehammer again, and this is being directed at people that increasingly are already doing everything they can to behave responsibly. So, you know, again, I support a letter both to the regulatory agencies and our state legislators to try and get some clarity and and a more balanced perspective, hopefully.
Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. You talked about local program, whether you should continue to be pursuing a local program. And you mentioned the RCD, Resource Conservation District. The concern I have, that's why programs like fish-friendly farming, rangeland water quality program, and different best management practice programs that are ongoing of the past and also the present are probably more favored by private landowners than going through a program with the RCD. RCDs, based on how they're operated and what have you, all that information is public. That's why with fish-friendly farming, third-party inspection, all ranch plans are kept on the ranch. They're also inspected to make sure that landowners are doing what they plan to do and said they would do within their management plan. And when you take and house these programs in a public agency, anytime, anywhere, someone or entities can come and charge violations. So I would be, you know, you need to look at privacy for those landowners and their records and their management practices, except with perhaps when enforcement comes from the Regional Water Board and wants to see the monitoring data, etc. So I'm just voicing that. If the RCD says, oh, this program out of Michigan, everything is kept, all the management plans, where your roads are, different facility uses, equipment, I mean, it could go into a whole lot of things. If those aren't kept private, you know, it's a loss. So the RCD could come forward with a program and guarantee me that each landowner's management plans are kept private and kept on the property itself and the monitoring data. I could be more for it. But at this point, I don't know if that's a perfect local program for private landowners.
Yeah, we were very aware of that issue, and we wouldn't put the agricultural operations in a position where that sort of detailed information would be subject to a Public Records Act request. So we're aware of that. Again, finding an entity within the program, and actually the Regional Water Quality Board is looking to keep the plans on farm at this point in time, which is a big plus in our mind.
And there is an example of that with the Regional Board going back to the Garcia River, TMDL. And all management plans were able to be kept on site. And the monitoring done and the data collected was at any time available to Regional Board staff. But most of that information stayed with the landowners, so thank you.
This doesn't take any action, but we'll just direct you to stay on top of this, I guess is what we really want to tell you. Does anybody have any further direction?
Well, I do think having a letter of concern.
Well, we were indicated that between Chuck and
she's
Supervisor Brown are going to agendize a letter.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to ask this board a question. There's a webinar on the high-speed rail, and I wanted to ask some questions. And that starts at 11:30. I wanted to have some questions. So do we want to come back on a couple of these items in the afternoon? We're going to come, closed session starts at 1:30, right? We're going to do closed session.
Right, Supervisor Pinches, we were thinking that this would be a less than a half a day agenda. We would go straight into closed session. We have 6 items listed, but only 2 that will be heard today.
Okay.
So closed session could be brief.
Then can I direct the CEO's office? We have this at webinar in department, conference room A, going on 11:30.
Right, and staff.
Can you make sure the direct questions are asked of them about what is their financing plan? Because they're moving into this, what I call a $1 trillion rail plan in California. And there is no funding source. The brochures, information they put out, they have, you know, our state senator said, well, we're just going to fund it with bonds. That means borrowing money. So even if they do borrow the money, where's the money going to pay the principal and interest from? You don't move into a $1 trillion funding program or any program to build anything without funding in place. The state don't. So can you have somebody make sure for your office?
Yeah, Supervisor Pinches, I have 2 staff that will be sitting in on the webinar.
But I don't really want them to just listen. I want them to make sure
they have also heard you, and I've gotten noticed as we speak, and they will ask the question about financial plans.
Okay, so then we'll move on. So we'll go to agenda item 6C, consideration and adoption of resolution of the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors in support of the proposed northern expansion of the boundaries of the Gulf of the Farallines and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries and the further expansion of the Gulf of the Farallines National Marine Sanctuary to include the entire Mendocino County coast. Supervisors Jurdy and McCowan are the sponsors.
So I'd like to add a little addendum to our agenda summary that we wrote up, and that is just to clarify for the board that this board in June of 2011 did send on a 5-0 vote a letter in support of the legislation which was in Congress at the time, which was by Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey to expand the boundaries up to Point Arena, so essentially to include 1/4 of the Mendocino coast. So that we didn't have that in the agenda summary, but I wanted to clarify that. So that was voted on by the board in June of 2011 as an off-agenda item, but it was brought onto the board's agenda.
I'd like to acknowledge that we have
unanimously.
That says passed unanimously.
I'd like to acknowledge that we have a letter here from former Supervisor Norm Duvall that he supports this proposal, and he also supports it to include the coast off of Oregon too.
I think he said all the way up to the Canadian border, did he not?
He proposed, yeah. So just a little more additional background I'd like to provide is that the National Marine Sanctuary Act was signed into law by President Nixon, and it the largest marine sanctuary enacted in federal waters was actually enacted by George W. Bush out near Hawaii, and that this particular national sanctuary was signed into law by President George Herbert Walker Bush. And it includes, as you know, the Marin County coast, and this proposal that they're contemplating would be to include the Sonoma coast and 1/4 of the Mendocino coast. And so the resolution that Supervisor McCown and I drafted up is drafted saying we support that, and we would like them to consider including the entire Mendocino coast. As a practical matter, I've spoken with a number of people about this, and the process that they're going through right now is they're looking at doing an environmental impact statement over the next year or so, which would be up to Point Arena as contemplated right now. However, they could, at our request and request of others, look at an environmental statement to include the entire Mendocino coast, or including the Humboldt County coast if they wanted to. Probably realistically, what they would most likely do is look at to the Point Arena as proposed, but possibly they might do an alternate analysis. Environmental impact reports usually look at an alternative scenario, and so the alternative scenario that they might do at our request is to include the entire Mendocino coast. So our resolution isn't going to guarantee that they take action. But they might, I think from what I understand, they might consider expanding the area, and they're open to it. And I can add some more later, but the response that we had at the Point Arena meeting that I attended and Supervisor McCown attended was largely in support of this. The table I was at was with people who were mostly in support of it. We did, the table I was at had one person that I heard speaking against it was Jim Martin, and it was mostly a concern of what might happen, not based on the proposed rules as written today, but he seemed to be concerned that there could be rules written at some point in the future which could restrict. However, the guidelines that they have right now, there are 3 levels of restrictions on offshore drilling that are in this marine sanctuary. And I just wanted to clarify, this is not the Marine Protection Act. This is not the state program. This is very different. And actually, the history of the Federal Marine Sanctuary Act is for multiple uses. And this particular marine sanctuary does prohibit offshore drilling in it.
Good. Can I ask you a real question for him? Supervisor Hamburg, when we talked about this a month or so ago, he mentioned that the sport fishing industry was opposed to this. I don't see, we have no letter of that back, but do you know, to your knowledge, what's...
I would say I think I can answer that from the inquiries I've made and the research I've done. I don't think they're necessarily, we talked about Jim Martin, Supervisor Jurdy mentioned him as being very leery. Yes, commercial and sports fishermen are very leery. I can't say they're totally against it, but they're very leery, and I do have some comments that will explain that. They are leery.
Okay. I'm going to go to Supervisor McGowan because he's a co-sponsor of this.
Yes.
First.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think it's true that...
You gentlemen have a tough sell today, you know.
Pardon?
You gentlemen have a tough sell today.
Well, on the other hand, ocean protection in Mendocino County has been a mom and apple pie issue for the last 20 or 25 years. It's not been a controversial issue, and I think that's one reason that this board in 2011, as Supervisor Jurdy verified, supported 5-0 the proposed northern expansion of the Cordell Bank and Gulf of the Farallones marine sanctuaries. So we're already on record 5-0, and all of us, the people to my left, the more progressive people, voted in favor of that. So you're already on record in support of half of what the resolution calls for.
Of course, none of us ever changed their vote, have we?
Seldom. We're models of consistency. But so what this resolution is asking that goes further would be to request that the northern expansion of the Gulf of the Farallones Marine Sanctuary include the entire Mendocino County coast. And the primary reason for doing that is the expansion as proposed, and certainly as we would expect it to be if it includes the northern Mendocino County coast, would be to protect the Mendocino County coast from offshore oil and gas drilling, which, again, this board and previous boards have strongly supported. And I think we've seen with the disaster in the Gulf that any oil spill, any problem that we have out there associated with oil drilling would be disastrous to the Mendocino County coast and our coastal economy as it impacts fisheries, recreation, tourism. And certainly the tourism and recreation are a huge part of the Mendocino County economy, and I don't think people come here envisioning that they're going to be watching the sunset silhouetted by an oil drilling platform. So if we want permanent protection for the Mendocino County coast from oil and gas drilling, inclusion in the marine sanctuary would affect that, and it would do it as it is written. And you kind of have to make a decision, am I for this or am I against it, based on the way it's written. And the way it's written, there's no further restrictions or regulations on sport or commercial fishing, and the resolution of support is predicated on that. So, what we're asking the board to do beyond the affirmation of support previously expressed for the proposed northern expansion is to include the Mendocino coast, the entire Mendocino coast, provided that doing so will not impose any additional regulations or restrictions on sport or commercial fishing or on existing community traditions. And that would include something like the Fort Bragg fireworks or the Point Arena fireworks. So if we have an existing community tradition, what we're calling for support of is no further restrictions on those. And I will say that the National Marine Fisheries personnel who were present at these public hearings that were held were very attentive to accurately recording all the comments that were being made to make sure that they accurately captured them. I think it's a good process. Not only was former Congresswoman Woolsey present, but also the current directors of the Cordell Bank and the Gulf of the Farallones Marine Fisheries. They were very encouraging to the idea that we could potentially expand this to include the entire Mendocino County coast. They were very understanding of the concern about any additional restrictions on fisheries, and I know people are leery about that. Anytime you dance with the federal government, you have to be a little bit concerned. But the fact that Jim Martin is not here, and we can find out in a minute when we go to public comment, but I think the fact that Jim Martin is not here would indicate that he understands that the board's support for this is predicated on no further restrictions or regulations on sport or commercial fishing. So that's what this regulation is in support of, or this resolution.
Before we go to public discussion, can I ask you a question? the last part of the resolution says on existing community traditions. What if all of a sudden off the Mendocino coast we decide that we had a chance to get, for example, the America's Cup race, the yacht races? I mean, that could potentially, as an example, be a huge boon for the economics of Mendocino County.
We don't you don't need to worry about
maybe
that.
Maybe that's an extreme example.
Well, you don't need to worry about it because we don't have the onshore infrastructure to support something like that.
Well, maybe that's an extreme example, but, I mean.
Well, here's the thing. It does not, I have to say I don't know. But I don't think that is a good example.
Could
it's an extreme example.
Could I just clarify? So this marine sanctuary is in federal waters, so it's only 3 miles out, and it doesn't include the entire 200 miles. So it's 3 miles out. I forgot the actual number of miles out, but
it don't start till 3 miles out.
The first 3 miles are state waters, and.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to public comment. Does any members of the public want to speak in this? I'm kind of surprised there's no members of the public here.
It's not controversial.
Okay, we're trying to move this. Supervisor Brown.
Golly, thank you. There's a lot of history about getting involved in certain legislation or initiatives. And one of the ones for me happened in 1987. And that had to do with protected tule elk being transported from the Owens Valley to Lake Pillsbury Ranch. Herd increased. Herd didn't stay where they were relocated. They came into Potter Valley. And as their numbers grew, ranchers in Potter Valley and the hills were being overgrazed. There was a great number of them. The only solution for ranchers in Potter Valley, because being state protected, they could not chase them out of their fields, they could not do anything with them other than watch them use the land that formerly was used by their cattle and sheep for grazing. So, and I will say legislation was sponsored to take care of that problem, and actually passed by then Assembly Member Dan Hauser. And actually it turned in, as the sheriff says, it's like sausage being made, turned into a statewide bill. Potter Valley never did get a benefit from that, although Fish and Wildlife Services had a responsibility for that herd. So they talked all the ranchers and landowners going into a ranch for wildlife program that they had. This way you will be protected. Well, I would say that many of them had no choice but to do that. Probably 6 of the ranchers that did, there's still 1 very happy and 5 very upset for going into the program with expectations that have changed with more rules, restrictions, and with changing staff and regulators and how they implement the Ranch for Wildlife program. It's been a disaster for 5 of them. And if you come to Potter Valley today, you will notice more signs being put out in the valley, elk crossing. Now, why do I bring this forward? I bring it forward because another piece of legislation that was presented by an assembly member in Southern California had to do with her representing her constituents that were commercial fishermen, but disallowed a certain hook or equipment to go do their fishing. So what was passed with that was a change in law that granted them the ability to use that equipment for fishing, as long as certain marine sanctuaries were set up in exchange. That gave birth to legislation, and that's what we call today the MLPA, Marine Life Protection Act. So I do know and voiced later that commercial and sport fishermen are very leery about this, and you only have to talk to them about what has happened with fishing, especially commercial. And we have small commercial fishermen. They may seem big to us, but they also take out sports fishermen. And all the requirements today are huge. And I heard you say that NOAA was there and taking good notes. Well, NOAA enforcement, I need to tell you, gives interagency awards, and one of those awards is conviction of a person without evidence on some type of environmental law. So I'm going to quit my lecture, and I would like to hear where Supervisor Pinchas may or may not be going. But when I look at the resolution, and I'm not going to reread it, but it was read by yourself, Supervisor McCowan, that we would oppose any additional regulation or restrictions that was placed on sport or commercial fishing or existing traditions. And it seemed like, oh yeah, it's in here in the resolution. But I want to go to County Council and say, County Council, 5 years from now, if another Board of Supervisors is faced with additional restrictions like we all see, federal and state regulation and how it goes, we just had talk on the waiver process, does that, we cannot tie the hands. They may not, the Board of Supervisors of the time, in case more regulation comes down, we can't tie their hands, right? With this resolution, or does this become the policy and they would have to, the board of the time, would have to oppose in any regulation further with this matter in the future?
Thomas Parker, County Council, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. When you're in, you're in. If you pass this, regardless of whether the board passes this resolution, if the entire Mendocino coast is added to the future, any future expansion, we will be in. And if there are future regulations that might in some way harm the fishing industry, or parts of the fishing industry along the Mendocino coast, we would have the opportunity, along with the rest of the general public, to add our comments and hopefully sway those regulatory process decision makers, or not sway them, as the case may be. But no, just because you put a policy position in this proposed resolution that says fishing interests would not be given further regulatory burdens, restrictions, whatever, that doesn't bind the federal government.
But does it bind for future Board of Supervisors to be on the spot and advocate against that, against further restrictions than what appeared today?
Well, it would set the stage for board positions as of the date of the future regulations. Boards can always change their positions.
That's my point. Thank you.
Boards can always change their positions, and the board position of 2013 may not be the board position of 2017.
So you can't tie a hands of a Board of Supervisors for future commitment.
That's correct.
By the same as you, just because you sign a letter of support means you don't have to sign a resolution.
I would also add just a procedural note. 3 votes would be needed to pass this resolution today. If there is a 2-2 tie, it is not adopted by the board. Thank you.
We all understand that. Well, seeing no other comment, I guess it's my turn on this. You know, my big issue is the whole issue, the whole accumulative effect. I mean, in this county, the federal government basically shut down our whole eastern side, called the Mendocino National Forest, which is the whole eastern side of this county, and we all know the economic impact of that. And basically, with this, the way I see it, although maybe to some degree we can argue, we're attempting to shut down the whole western side of Mendocino County, which is the whole Pacific Ocean. And incrementally, and I'm talking to our assessor, she reviews on an annual basis over $300 million worth of conservation easements and such in this county. And that's a substantial, as you know, 60% of the taxes go to our schools, and 30% go to the county, 8% goes to special district and 2% to the cities. But a cumulative effect over all this conservation and preservation movement, and incrementally everything is a good idea. This bill here is probably a good idea. And they're all good ideas. To take 40 acres over on the coast and buy it and put it into a state park or add it to a state park. These are incrementally all good ideas. But the economics of it, we're seeing, we're conserving and preserving our county into bankruptcy. And that's just a fact. And by today with my votes, I'm gonna probably add to that. Although hopefully, as Supervisor Jurdy said, it's not gonna affect the 3-mile limit. So if we wanna do something along the coast, whether it's recreational or something, I hope it wouldn't be limited to. And Supervisor McCowan says, well, you can only go by what the wording is what they're doing today. You can't, in 20 years they might totally prohibit even being in that area, and that could happen. But, if it was just me, I would not support this. Because my feelings about, I don't try to, although everybody's a hypocrite, but between my ranch and my personal travel, I use gas and diesel and oil on a daily basis. I don't even have lights at my house unless I turn on the generator at the ranch. So I'm not even totally opposed to 1 or 2 oil derricks out there off the coast, because first of all, I think they would be far out there. So I don't want to be too hypocritical, because I see the need to using gas and diesel way into our future. Maybe, and I'm all for solar and wind and all that. But the main reason I'm going to support this is, if you took a vote in this county tomorrow morning, this would pass probably by about 98%, maybe 2%. And probably most fishermen would support it. As we noted, we don't even have a letter from any fishermen opposed to this. So I could go on about this issue of the cumulative effect, but it really concerns me how we're incrementally, everything that we preserve and protect is in a good idea, and everybody has a support for it. But a cumulative over time, and it's really starting to take an effect, not only on our local economy on a daily and annual basis, but over, say, decades. And so that's what really concerns me the best. But without any further ado, I will support this. Supervisor Brown.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pinches, and thank you for, 'cause I think there were 3 against bringing it as an off-agenda item against that at our last board meeting. And just so you know, out of respect for my colleague, Supervisor Dan Hamburg, my vote was going to be a symbolic one to support the resolution, because I didn't think you would. So it kind of appears to me that perhaps today we have a unified board. I think we all struggle sometimes with our votes. It's not exactly the way that we see it personally, or maybe the constituents within our district see it. However, I do feel it's important. We are colleagues. We need to move together as a body. And so therefore, I'll be voting for it as well.
And in a quote from Supervisor McCowan, he says, we're all coastal supervisors. Supervisor McCowan, let's move this on.
Well, we do all come from a coastal county, so I think we are coastal supervisors, and I really do appreciate the expressions of support despite the reservations that you've both voiced. And I think Supervisor Jurdy and I share some of those reservations, because it is always uncertain what the future may hold. But I believe this is the best opportunity we have to move forward with hopefully permanent protection of the entire Mendocino County coast from oil and gas drilling. So I will move that we adopt the resolution in support of the proposed northern expansion of the Gulf of the Farallones and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries, and the further expansion of the Gulf of the Farallones National Marine Sanctuary to include the entire Mendocino County coast.
I'll second that, and I appreciate the comments both of you have made. And we may have an opportunity later on, if they do consider this in their environmental document, that we could reiterate our support for not regulating fishing in the future. So I want to hold
community traditions
or we want to hold firm on that position. And thank you very much, and I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion second. If there's no further comment, let's vote on it. By the butt.
Try again.
Try it again.
Motion passes unanimously with Chair Hamburg absent.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move down to the CEO's report. We have your report. Is there some highlights? It's a pretty lengthy report. You want to go through it one?
I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there are some highlights
Okay,
I'd like
fine.
to make.
Go forward.
Thank you. I believe that we talked about the art display yesterday, and I hope that the public enjoys the new art in our board chamber. We still have a state of emergency at the Dora Street complex, and GSA continues to bring that forward every 2 weeks. This board had questioned the capital projects plan regarding the juvenile hall control panel replacement, and I said that I would update this board at the next meeting. I'd like you to know that funding has been identified within the probation budget to cover the costs related to replacement of the juvenile hall control panel, and that is in the works.
Thank you.
We do have a fee hearing that will be set for April 9th. Pacific Gas and Electric will be doing public hearings, and I bring this to this board's attention in case this board would like staff to request a presentation from PG&E. We will do so. I wanted to comment on our tax sharing efforts. As we all know, this board dissolved the tax sharing ad hoc committee in December of 2012. I said that I would come back and report to this board any activities that have occurred thus far. I'd like this board to know that I did meet with the Ukiah City Manager last week. We will pull our staff together, county staff and city staff. We will continue to look at formula options. This is misstated in my report here. It appears that it could be misread as staff will bring the formula options to the Board of Supervisors and the City Council. That is not correct. Staff will meet. We will be looking at the formulas at a time when, as your CEO, I believe that we have made progress. I will come back to this board and let you know that, and recommend that we reconvene the tax sharing ad hoc. I can tell you today that I do not see enough progress to make that recommendation to this board that we reconvene the tax sharing ad hoc. We've had one meeting of the city manager and the CEO, and I do have to pull staff together. I think one of the biggest challenges is having staff from my office and from the auditor's office to work with the city and really look at what formulas the city is proposing to us. So at this point in time, I would just like to say that we are meeting, we will meet, but I see no reason to reconvene the tax sharing ad hoc at this time. I don't anticipate that I will be back before this board on this item before June with any recommendation. On a lighter note, the San Francisco Giants 2012 World Series trophy will be on display at the Willits Library, and that will be tomorrow, Wednesday, the 27th, between 3:30 and 5:30. And for the public, the Willits Library is at 390 East Commercial Street in Willits. If you have any questions, you could call 459-5908.
And I'm going to repeat that just for the listening audience, that the San Francisco Giant World Series trophy be at the County Museum tomorrow in Willits from 3:30 to 5:30. I think to me, that's a big deal.
Yes.
So
Excuse
if you
me.
know any Giants fans, make sure they know.
Let me clarify, this is a county library located in Willits. I think I said the Willits Library. It's a county library located in Willits. Okay, regarding the budget, I think you know that we continue to work on the budget and the budget reports. I have included the Fitch notification as an attachment to my report. In the effort of moving forward here, let me go to March 26th. We plan to do a healthcare reform informational presentation. April 9th is the fee hearing, and I'd like to go to the Fitch notification. As we all know, they revised our rating from positive to stable. I do want to just point out on the third page, they do talk about our Retirement Association funded ratio, and they say as of June 30th of 12, MSERA had a funded ratio of 74% or 67% under Fitch's alternate investment assumption of 7% return. So I think this board had a robust discussion about what to do. Do we accept? Do we not accept? What should our numbers really be? And I think we'll see. We will bring that back, and we'll have more discussion about
Carmel,
that.
back on the Fitch rating. There was a press release issued. Are you aware of any of the newspapers printing this press release?
No, we put out the press release yesterday. To my knowledge, it has not been picked up. We could look at it as a good news story. I'm hoping that that one of our newspapers will pick it up. I think we could continue to look at the Press Democrat and hope that they'll pick it up if one of our local papers don't. Historically, I see notifications, press releases that we do that don't get printed until the weekend, so it may go out in the weekend. And I think regarding the press release, basically, we talk about the positive development, but also the areas of concern. And retirement is an area of concern, and the lack of growth and development within the county. So I think in light of time, Supervisor Pinches, that's my report, unless there are any questions.
Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. On page 1, Pacific Gas and Electric public hearings.
Right.
My vote would be yes. I'd like them to come before the board. And then on page 3 of your report, we go down to county concerns about sequester cuts. It does say 5%, but we're also hearing it could be 10%. So it's middle of the page. And it
Right.
says reduced by approximately 5% is what NACO, they're also, I've heard 10%. So don't know if that's correct or not. But
Good. I'd like to poll the board. Is there interest from the rest of the board members about having PG come forward for the presentation? Supervisor McCown.
I have no objection.
So, Carmel, can
Yeah.
you arrange for that?
We'll do that.
It's not time sensitive, but whatever we put in the schedule.
We'll do that.
Okay. That concludes your report.
Unless there are any questions,
Further
and there's
questions?
no ledge report today.
No ledge report. Okay. Department of Transportation will accept his director's report.
I do have.
He's out of town.
Yes. But I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Reading on page 2, workshop, California Occupational Safety and Health Act. And I just made the comment that this is being proactive, and it's excellent what they're doing in the department than being out of compliance, which could bring fines about 3 times the amount that it would probably cost by the proper record keeping that is being proposed by hiring someone outside the agency to do the training and keep this up. Have had a lot of experience with that, and those people make sure that all is done correctly. So I'm just wanted to express my thought that I'm very much in favor of it.
Okay. Supervisor reports, if we can keep those pretty brief, only hit the high spots. Any board members?
I carpooled with the CEO to attend a workshop in Sacramento last week about the impacts of the healthcare reform on county finances, and I thought it was helpful for me to get a elementary understanding of how that is possibly going to work out. I think there's still some uncertainties at this point. I think CEO's nodding her head, yes. And then this last week I was attending the CSAC conference or workshop for new supervisors, and during that I was discussing with some people there about the transportation bill that the federal government passed and is now working its way through the state of California, and the fact that there is at least one funding stream in that is in jeopardy of no longer going to rural and suburban counties. And so I was trying to gauge what kind of support we could get from CSAC to lobby for the small and suburban counties, and that's possible, but because they do represent the larger counties, they may or may not, take a position on that particular issue. And so I then went over and spoke with the Rural Counties Representative Council, RCRC, which I guess the County of Mendocino at one point was a member of. Anyway, met with their staff for about a half hour or so, and brought this to their attention that this funding stream is in jeopardy for small counties. They're willing to talk to us about this, and whether or not we're a member, I think they're interested in this subject, and I think we'll try to pursue with CalCog and at least MCOG to lobby on this issue. And I also met with her briefly with legislative staff for both Assemblymember Chesbro and Noreen Evans while I was there.
Ms. Angelo, this issue about RCRC's come up several times. Can I direct the CEO's office to come back with an agenda item to see if we want to join or rejoin RCRC?
Yeah, thank you. We'll do that.
And then just one final thing. I met also last week on Tuesday with a number of people on the coast. This meeting was organized by the Noyo Harbor District staff, and there was one commissioner there, Tommy Ancona, a longtime commissioner of the Harbor District, and it had to do with their ongoing issues with trying to come up with the funding to remove the dredge spoil site, which is actually on property owned by the city of Fort Bragg, leased to the Harbor District for $1 a year, and it's just incredibly expensive for them to haul it out to a landfill. And so I really appreciate the work of Kevin Michelle, the new Harbor District employee who helped organize this meeting, and he's followed up with a number of emails to us, and I just wanted to relay one of them, and maybe we could direct this to the appropriate county person. And they asked, for example, the Harbor District apparently receives $293 last year for its share of the timber yield tax, and they saw that some other amount went to schools, et cetera, and so their question was, given the fact that they assume it had something to do with the fact that they're dealing with sediment downstream and that they're ultimately responsible for removing that sediment, if there was a opportunity for the county to make a discretionary decision about redirecting any of the timber yield tax in that basin from other jurisdictions to the Harbor District. So they don't even know if that's possible, but they just raised the question.
Okay. Thank you. My staff will look into this, and we'll work with the auditor, and we could report back either in the next CEO report, or if it's an item to be agendized, we'll bring it back.
Okay, thanks.
Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. And thank you for your report, Supervisor Jurdy. The Eel Russian River Commission met on February 15th. Won't go over the agenda, but very informative, and I think our new member from Eureka, Commissioner, and the alternate commissioner really felt good about what the commission has on their agenda. But one item I do want to talk about, and this will be being rolled out on Earth Day, April 22nd, and I've brought copies, and it's called the Russian River Compact, and so I want to pass these out to everyone, because I don't want you to hear about it in a news release on Earth Day and go, why didn't Supervisor Brown inform us? But myself and Supervisor Hamburg are sitting on this compact committee. It's called an executive committee, so it will be rolling out to the public. I also wanted to call attention to the letter that was sent by our Department of Planning and Building Services that had to do with the SOI, Ukiah Sphere of Influence, or proposed, and the comment letter, and then also the attachment to that showing the areas that they were commenting on. So I really thank the CEO's office and PBS for getting that out. I don't know if others received it, but I did just recently from the Water Board, and
This would be the State Water Resources Control Board, and they have some hearings, information out. It's a draft policy for maintaining in-stream flows in Northern California coastal streams, and the project location for this particular what would you say, regulation is exactly what it is coastal streams from the Matola River to San Francisco and coastal streams entering San Pablo Bay in Marin, Sonoma, and portions of Napa, Mendocino, and Humboldt counties. So I think it's important that we look at it. And many of our municipalities rely on for instance, the city of Fort Bragg with Noyo River rely on water resources. City of Ukiah, the greater Ukiah Valley with Russian River water. So those are just two examples. There's many within the 3rd District as well. So I think we need to keep our eye on it, and I'm going to do further investigation. In the report from the CEO, and also you heard from Supervisor Jurdy about all the healthcare reform, and really the CEO's report gives the whole sum of the Board of Directors meeting that was held on February 21st in Sacramento for CSAC, and not said in the CEO's report, probably properly so, is the state administration wanted the CSAC Board of Directors to take immediate action on either a county option or a state option that's being proposed to do with the healthcare reform, and the CSAC Board did not, even at the urging of the governor. So he's not happy because we want to consider a third option. So we will be holding an emergency meeting sometime in the near future to consider other options. And after numerous counties vetted both of the options, and I know you realize some counties have county hospitals, some counties are running their own healthcare programs where we have our health centers around the county, and everybody is in a different situation, but everyone is very concerned about the liability and future liability of the whole reform process, whether it's at the federal level, what's coming to the state, and what's at the state level that must comply with the federal regulations. So it's a real mixed bag, and there's still a lot of unknowns. I will say the governor is not happy with us, but we have a responsibility to our counties, not to state administration, to make sure the right action is taken. So we will go forward. I have all the other actions on policies, legislative priorities, etc., that were on the agenda for your review if you'd like to see the packet, or you can go online. We did have policy brought forth by Supervisor Mark Lovelace of Humboldt County, and it was a suggested policy on trespass marijuana grows. It's going to be further debated because many of the supervisors did not want to vote on it, but they wanted to go back and talk to their county councils. Because of the current status of defunding of a lot of children care services, our president, Dave Finnegan, for CSAC has encouraged and brought forth, and the entire CSAC board has supported this, that a resolution on the Year of the Child and make it a number one priority for us. And it was embraced by all counties. And I want to work with our representative on this board to First Five Commission, as well as myself being on the Policy Council on Children and Youth, to bring forth that resolution. And Supervisor Hamburg is our representative to the First Five Commission, but to begin what we all think is a very important action, begin it with a resolution. And so I'll be bringing it forth, hopefully with Supervisor Hamburg in March. So that's it. Thanks.
The big news in the 3rd District is the Willis Bypass construction phase of the projects started yesterday morning.
Ooh, cool.
So it's, that's, you might, that, to me, that is big news, because I keep telling people that Mendocino County itself has over $33 million invested on that, in that project. So it is now in the construction phase. Supervisor.
Well, Warbler says she shut you down, but we'll find.
I didn't notice her in a tree this morning.
I don't know. Well,
maybe the cold weather had something to do with it.
The only thing I really wanted to add was that the Mental Health Court Planning meeting is going to meet again early next week. And again, it's a collaboration between the Superior Court, principally Judge Ann Moorman, Mental Health Director Pinizzato, Public Defender Thompson, District Attorney Eister, Chief Probation Officer Brown. And I expect that following that meeting, we might be able to give a firm date of when the Mental Health Court is going to commence. And we are anticipating it will be in March, and it could be very, very soon in March. So I think that's very encouraging, and it's really great to see the commitment that all of the departments have towards making it happen, as well as our community partners who are going to be assisting in providing what is now called care management services to give the participants the best chance for succeeding in improving the outcomes in their lives, as well as that'll be an overall benefit to the community and their family members. I also just wanted to note that Congressman Huffman, I believe, was at the Harbor District meeting regarding the dredge spoils, so that's a very positive indication of his commitment to becoming fully informed on local issues that are of importance to us, and his commitment to be a presence in the district, which was one thing that his predecessor was noted for. So I think we're off to a good start there.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move into closed session. We have 5 closed session items. Tom, you got
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, this is County Counsel Tom Parker. I expect we're only going to have 2 of the 5 closed sessions, which will be for the board's information items D and E.
Okay. Said we will report out at the conclusion of closed session. Whether there's any action or not, we'll still report out.